Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So, this is the video for Thursday, September 18th. I'll release this later tonight. I started the video yesterday, and this is probably, in terms of a turning point, not a pun here, in the story where Jimmy Kimmel gets suspended is a big moment. So, yesterday I was thinking about how they're going to prolong this story. I've been talking about this for a while. When they have these events that are, either organic and natural and are turned into a political, psychological operation, and the CIA or one of the intelligence agency is involved. They will roll out these information packets. They talk about this in the movie JFK, because some of these information packets were rolled out overseas before the events actually happen, right? So they have these drops of information. It's a planned thing. Like it's, on day one, they're going to talk about this. On day two, it's going to be about this, right? And there'll be things now on the internet that are kind of leaked a little bit, that this guy had a transgender lover that was out there, and the New York Post covered it. And then it makes it around to MSNBC and CNN on day 2 or 3 probably. Or no, day 4 or 5 maybe. And really on Monday, the following Monday, so probably day 6. So, when one of the goals is to distract people from the Jeffrey Epstein nightmare for Trump, like that is obviously one of the big things, because he was on his heels. And so that is, the first piece. Like, what's the motivation, right? Like getting into the motivation. Who might have done this if you don't believe in the official story? All my videos, when I make something like this, like it's a series of videos. And these videos are, 2 hours. So, it's a lot of content. And I'm not, expecting that people will watch every minute of them. But watching every minute of it is crucial because, there's things in here. I mean, the spiritual things obviously are, to me, the most important, but there are things in here that are, it's a way of thinking about things. It's a way of working out what you're seeing without ever being able to prove it to, like, yourself in a factual way or other people, but just not, oh, this is what happened kind of thing, like a lot of people do, without really having critical thinking skills or, the ability to read situations of people and intuition and a divine aspect to this thing. In my previous video, at the end of it, I talk about how we're all expected to act. We're all actors. You go to work and you're supposed to act, and they're mad at you when you display your authentic personality, which is a fireable offense, right? Like when you talk about what you believe, what your beliefs are, especially if you're someone who doesn't believe in the official story, that would be a fireable offense in many places, in most places at work, talking about what you believe in. And, not that that's necessarily ever a good idea, even back when, I was talking about how when you had Walter Cronkite and there was no cable, there was no, we had 3 or 4 channels when I grew up. Fox came in later on, PBS. And so you had like 5 channels where the information could be put out. And then there was radio, which was, highly monitored. You had to get a license, an FCC license to be on the radio. And if you said things that were in violation of the very strict rules, again, we lived in a conservative Christian society. And so there was there was limited information you could get out there that wasn't a part of the main story. So everybody kind of believed the same thing, right? Everybody believed that we landed on the moon, right? Like there was not a big, how many people don't believe we landed on the moon now, right? And everybody watched the moon landing. These events would get almost 100% viewership, right? It's the Super Bowl and these other things, these sporting events and all that other stuff. So now you have so much more option, even in like paid, professional television and professional news. And then you have all the stuff on the internet. So now everybody sees events differently. Like events are perceived in totally different lenses. These lenses are supported by other people that not necessarily in your local environment. You can connect with people on the internet. And so, now people's belief system is quite diverse. And, like what I was saying before, people are expected to act. And now people are, their own publicists putting out fake, sort of personas on social media. They're marketing themselves for romantic, partners, or, in terms of just in life in general. Fake families, their families are miserable, but they have all these pictures of vacations and trying to make yourself look happier than you are. And you're expected to act like in various venues, just the people you're around. You're socially expected to put on a performance. Like everyone's supposed to act a certain way and go along with certain things that you necessarily don't believe in or don't have any interest in. And that it didn't happen like old civilizations where you were in a village or something, or whatever it might be. And so like you were the same person and you lived in a small community and everybody kind of knew you. And now you might not even hang out with your original family who saw you completely different, right? So you have to, when you go back there, they put you in a certain kind of category. They do you whatever role you play in your family, and you've changed completely as an adult, right? And it brings back all this stuff and these things that people undergo. But what you have here is Trump acted. Trump acted in WWE. He acted in various movies, cameos, and then he was people on reality TV are also actors because it's not just reality TV. There's a persona and a character that they play, and then there's also the editing. They can take any of the mass amount of footage and cast people in different roles. Like in every reality TV show, there's the villain. There's the dream couple if it's one of those sort of dating shows or whatever. But there's they create a storyline, and based in the amount of in the way they edit the thing, they can make anybody look like a villain or a hero. In fact, somebody did a video about this, how they did a fake reality TV show and they edited it in different ways. And they take different time periods and people talking about different people, and it makes it sound like they're talking about somebody else, and they're this whole thing. It's just editing; they can do anything. So, that's all a part of our lives now, right? Where everything can be faked and staged and scripted and acted and these things. And so these people are professional actors. This woman, Erica Kirk, was a model actress and reality TV star, wannabe. These people. And they have this, persona. You have your work persona. You have your, these various things. And it's also psychologically difficult for people because they don't know who the hell they are because people play so many different roles now. And then people get in front of people and, you're one thing to one group of people and you're one thing on the social media. You're one thing to your family and you're one person at work, right? And you get in front of all these people and you have all like the, like in the public, like in some kind of, the way that somebody is made famous and, it goes on the news or something. And then you have all these different personas, right? You have all these different people you're playing and roles you're playing. And it becomes something of a, like a overwhelming psychological breakdown because which persona do you pick in these things, right? So I was talking about that. I'm going to be talking about that in the beginning of the video, that these are all actors and people who do acting. And then I was covering who has the biggest motive in terms of what are the motives, right? There's this kid there's a story, the official story, that this kid's motive is that he dated a trans guy and he was radicalized by the left in a couple of months where he didn't seem to care about politics at all, then became radicalized and immediately thought that he should murder somebody. And he picked Charlie Kirk because Charlie Kirk is evil in some way. And then that evil, that belief made him do what he's done now, which is, kind of extraordinary given he wasn't trained to be an assassin and, all the ways that this went down, right? I mean, he had some hunting training, right? So, and he was able to execute this complex plan. Even so much that he hid the rifle and was going to go back and retrieve, all the stuff that I've talked about. And Then he left all this incriminating information all over the internet, and these messages and all the things that he did with his lover and his group on Discord and all these things, which I'll get into because there's a Fox News with J.D. Vance thing. It's a lot of things. I'm covering a lot of stuff today. This is like I said, a turning point. But then there's how they keep the story going. And this thing with Jimmy Kimmel, right? Where now it's about censorship. And the Jimmy Kimmel thing is dominating the media last night and this morning. So now it's another big story that's preventing going back to Jeffrey Epstein, because now this story is about Jimmy Kimmel possibly losing his show over something that seems relatively mild. And so all these things are covered here. J.D. Vance gives a horrific interview on Fox, like it's, where they're going for it, right? And then there's the utilization. So there's Israel, which I'm going to get into, which has motivation to, who are, using this Charlie Kirk event. And then America and Trump, they're doing all kinds of shit, right? Trump and his government are doing all kinds of shit because of Charlie Kirk. Censorship, going after groups, all these other things. All right, so let's get into it here. So to start off with, when somebody fakes one part of something, if they're lying about one thing, if they're acting about one thing, then everything becomes suspect. Now, Erica Kirk was much more likable in everything else I've seen her than doing the eulogy, and it strikes me, it's a very odd thing, her, getting up there a couple days after her husband's dead and all the performing shit that she did. It wasn't just the eulogy. It was what she did on the casket. It was what she did on social media. Like, it was like anything but grieving, right? And most of you guys see that. Like, everyone's kind of freaked out by how weird it was. And it's not how she is at all. She's pretty happy, smiling, whatever she is, right? And so one of my viewers, like, I was watching this thing of them telling the story how they got together. And it was so contrived and icky and just whatever it was. And one of my viewers sent me, said, well, like, there was actually some interesting things that happened afterwards. And this is all I had yesterday on today's video. And so everything that developed after that with the stuff with Israel, which I'm going to show you, and all these other things. But I want to establish the acting portion, because I was talking about that yesterday. When people are performing for the camera and they are creating narratives and they are creating a persona and they want people to see them a certain way and they're building an audience. And then you're expected to pander to the audience, right? And so there's this.
3.5 hours, and they were starting to close up, and he was finished with his burger, just sat there. And I'm like looking around like, okay, did I get the job? Like, what's going on? I don't need the job, but did I get it? What's going on? And he goes,
I don't need the job, but did I get it? So, this video is about motivation and acting, right? And these personas. It's a combination of these two things. And you're in this situation where this guy asks you to dinner. And you're around the same age and you have the same beliefs. And she was on this, reality TV show, which she was pretty quick to give this guy her number and, this whole thing that went down because she wanted to be on the reality TV show, right? As I showed you that like 3 videos ago. And so she's there, and it's either a dating situation or a job situation or both, right? And she had her motivation going in. Like, what's her reason for being here? What's his reason for being here, right? And both of these things would possibly be an option because they end up being married, so there was interest there. There was, according to the official story, like, it could be all fucking fake, right? This could be a fake couple put together by the CIA, like whatever it is. Like, this is the world we live in, this is, or just, these celebrity people that get together for political reasons or for business reasons, right? So who knows what this is. But, they've come up with this story. Like, this is either a real story or a story they've come up with, right? like it's a package. But you have to like look at what the motivation is. So if you're saying this is real, a guy asks you to go to dinner, and you're there, and it's possibly you're going to work for him, but you don't need the job. You kind of like your job, and I don't even know why I'm here, so.
I'm not going to hire you. It's like, okay, well, thank goodness I didn't need the job because I'm already doing stuff here in Manhattan. He goes, I'm going to date you. And I kind of just stood, I froze. I mean, wouldn't you? I literally froze. I was just like, okay,
You froze?
Not expecting this at all. And
You weren't expecting this at all. You were not expecting the possibility that he was going to, like you didn't know what it is, right? You're going out to dinner with a dude, and, on the guise that it's possibly a job interview. But you didn't think, like, as a woman who's Miss Arizona, who's probably getting hit on all the time, who's friendly and sort of bubbly. So how many times a day you think she's getting hit on by guys? Former Miss Arizona in New York City and, out there and, in the Christian world, right, where, there's a lot of emphasis and just this culture of marriage and all these things, right, that she's not getting hit on constantly. And that this guy possibly is using this dinner, because she's not stupid, right? He's possibly using this dinner as a way to date her, date her in air quotes, right? Like, as a woman, you're constantly aware of that. When you're a young single woman, you're constantly aware of men, finding ways to get into your pants, get with you, right? Like it's just there. Like I'm in a state of shock. I didn't see that coming at all. I didn't see that coming at all. I froze. I didn't see that coming at all.
Just like, okay, was not expecting this at all. And I was like, do you want to how about we just be friends first? Like, see where it goes?
And I told her I had enough friends.
Okay, so they talk about this. I had enough friends for a bit here. So there's two things. Her saying want to be friends, she's either interested in him or not. And they both, in the age of social media, they both looked at each other's social media. They both knew who each other were, right? Like he was doing this Turning Point thing, and it was taken off. Now he's going to get a ton of money from Israel. Israeli supporters bought a building for him. That's how much he was owned by Israel, because that's a big thing that's coming up. In this, I got all this stuff with the motivation of Israel. And, he knows, they can look at each other and they can look at their social media profiles. And, she either was attracted to him or not. All this games that people play, all this, she either wanted to date him or not. She was interested. Like, this was exciting. Like, he said, I want to date you. It either excited you and you were like, yeah, I want that. Or I don't fucking, this creep. Which, if she thought he was a creep, she wouldn't have been there in the first place, right? Like, she was interested in this. She had career goals and possibly social goals, interest in him, right? Like, there's an attraction. Like, this happens like on a daily basis. And it's for somebody like her, young single, former Miss Arizona, it's even more so, right? It's a constant thing. And she's, as a Christian, they're in their late 20s. Getting married is a big deal. Like, as you're a Christian, marriage is always on the table. I don't have my tea in here. I have throat coat and motherword tea I make every day. Throat coat for my, because I'm talking, and motherword was good for the heart. And anyways, not recommending anything. But they would know, right? And then him saying, I have enough friends. Would you have 1,427 friends? You don't need another friend? In fact, his whole persona, his whole thing that he does is about friendships, like forming friendships and new friendships. He's supposed to be this friendly guy, like the nice guy in the world of, like, this kind of thing he does. And he goes to college campus and he's making friends. Like, that's, he's supposed to be, all these people talk about him, how friendly he is. He says, I have enough friends. Well, you have your quota filled. Like, well, it's a silly thing to say. I have enough friends. You know, like you wouldn't want to be friends if you're not going to date you, right? So, like, it's a weird thing. Like this whole thing, you know, it's kind of it's scripted, right? Like things that people say, you know, whether they're actually organically saying these things, there's no natural flow to it. You know, like I want to date you, you want to date me, this kind of thing. Like people do that on a fucking daily basis. It's just going out on a date. You're not committing to anything, right? It's not like a big fucking deal.
And that I didn't want to be friends with her, so...
You didn't want to be friends. We're going to be enemies if you don't date me. You're going to be my arch nemesis. Like, this is a turning point for you.
Was kind of a non-starter, but if she wanted to date, that would be great. I had enough friends, and I think she still finds that to be very funny, but I meant it.
And with
You know, you didn't meant it because, like, you still made friends afterwards.
out hesitation and like zero hesitation, he goes, I have enough friends in my life. So either we're going to date or we're not. Do I have any time to think about it? Yeah, you have until tomorrow night when I take you out for dinner, and then you can give me your answer at dinner tomorrow night. But know that the offer's on the table, and I want to date you. Okay. So then afterwards, it was like, thank you for this meeting. I need to go walk home now so I can process what happened. And I literally...
Well, you got to process this. Again, this didn't happen to you every day, all the time, where men are like are hitting on you. Like, you have to process this event, that this was a, you know, like a job interview / possible date. You can't handle something. Like I'm not a social person. I mean, you know, stress about social interactions. Like, I don't stress about them. Like, they stress me out. Like, you know, in social interactions, right? You know, whatever it is. And, like, I'm socially awkward. Like, so maybe not even stressed anymore, but I'm just socially awkward. And I want to get through them as quickly as possible. This wouldn't stress me out. Like, it's not a stressful situation. You know, there's, you know, whatever they're going through as a person. She's way more outgoing, right? She's an outgoing persona. She's an extrovert. And she's, you know, performed. Like, she's an actress and a model, and she's, you know, going to all these places in New York City, doing all this stuff. You know, Christian, she had her own, you know, podcast-like stuff going on. You know, she wanted to be a famous public peer person. People dealing with New York people. She's dealing with New York fucking entertainment people. The reality TV show. She's on that reality TV show where some gay guy takes an interest in her. Her friends try to set her up with him. Like, you know, I showed you that. Like, she's, you know, she's doing a lot of shit. She's meeting lots of people all the time. And many of these people are men, and they're hitting on her. And she needs to process this whole thing. I need to walk home and process. What just fucking happened? I was at a business meeting, and the guy turned the tables. He said, well, let's date. And I said, let's be friends first. And he's like, I got enough friends. And I got to process this thing. Fucking let's process the shit out of this.
I really remember walking home from like 54th and 5th all the way to 30th and Madison to just kind of process what just happened. And I remember calling my mom. And I was like,
I got to call my mom on this one. This one needs a walk and a call to mom. I need to walk. I need to walk in the streets of New York, which is always a place where you can be alone with your thoughts and not worry about being in the streets of fucking New York. And, you know, we can let your guard down and process this whole thing of a job interview / first date / you know, possible romantic thing. I don't even know. I got to process this and call my mom.
hey, she's like, hey, how are you? What's going on? How did it go? And I was like, well, I didn't get the job. She's like, oh, that's okay. I was like, but I got a boyfriend. And she's like, oh, that's...
Wait. You called your mom and told her that you're going on this interview with Charlie Kirk? Because why? You know, so, I mean, I'm sure she talks to her mom a lot, but you know what I mean. Like, she didn't know you might be interested. You didn't say, I'm interested in him. You know. I mean, he could have hired you and then hit on you. You know, like, there could have been that part of it.
Nice.
The first date ended, if I remember correctly, just telling her I needed to see her again very soon, I believe Saturday. And then I guess our second date was a basketball date. And then that was a very fun night, long night, and then I said, hey, do you want to go to Hawaii tomorrow? And because I was going anyway, and she said, sure. And so I bought her ticket, and she accompanied.
All right, so, just very performative. Like a story that, like, they could tell this story, and they both tell very similar stories. But this is about acting. And so I already did this stuff about Israel, and involves Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and Candace Owens, and then all this stuff about Israel and their motivation. Before that, I want to revisit the fake Trump assassination, right? The very WWE Trump assassination. And so to start off with, you're seeing a partial clip of a compilation that I did where there were all these political figures, Trump included. Obama did it a ton. Clinton started it. Both Clintons did it. Michelle Obama did it. Rick Santorum, Tim Walz, and Kamala Harris both did it in this recent election. And what it is somebody passes out in the audience, a stage thing. And they rally the person giving the speech. They're giving a political speech. These usually presidential candidates. And somebody passes out in the audience, and then they say, are you okay? And they take control of the situation to make themselves look good. Because one of the key words for the American public is safety, right? For the, any public. They want you to they want you to promise to keep them safe. We don't deal with death. We have this illusion about we're not dying. We don't talk about it. We don't think about it. And so this idea that the president can keep you safe and build safety, as a protector and a caring person, it's very staged, and they all do it. It's political theater. And the important part is to remember it's political theater, right? And once you engage in this, like this couple did, what we just saw, that presentation wasn't for them. When people tell a story, it's like they're telling their story. You're telling your story. And, sometimes you just want to tell your story, the way it happened, and your experiences, and that's why people go to therapy, to have some people listen to their bullshit story, their stuff that nobody cares about. And so sometimes you tell a story for you. And sometimes you tell it in a good way for somebody else, like a child, like I do here in these videos, where I'm telling these stories as a way to convey information, but also like a spiritual condition and a consciousness about it. Like it's a hopefully that through your story, people can avoid their own difficulties or go through something the right way because they hear an elder or somebody like that telling them a story, like a grandfather tells a grandson or granddaughter a story that they see, the grandfather sees that the kid is going to need this, like, information, right? You're giving them information for something they're going to have to deal with, right? And so there's those two ways. But then there's a story you tell to other people to manipulate them. You're telling them a story to move them in a way, emotionally. And this is what all these people do, these politicians. They're telling you a story and they're presenting an event to push you in one direction or another. And in the case of what's happened with Charlie Kirk, it's about Trump not only getting away with the Epstein thing and then destroying that story, this eclipsing the Epstein story, but it's now about Trump grabbing power, right? Trump, and victim consciousness to grab that power. So this thing happened, so that's why we're going. So they roll out the troops, and now they have a reason to take the troops and go persecute people, groups of people, liberal people, and it's because Charlie Kirk was killed, and then all the stuff that goes with it, and all the stuff that people are saying online. They can start getting rid of your freedom of speech, right? Just like the Democrats did, and something that Charlie Kirk was clearly against. But this is the reason, right? When the reason you take your shoes off at the airport is the shoe bomber. The reason you go through the body scanner is because the naked body scanner is because of the underwear bomber, right? The reason that there's so much security is because of the big event, the 9/11 event in 2001. The reason they search for your luggage is that event that happened in England right, where there was 24 bombs and suitcases, right? So something happens, and then they take a bunch of your rights and your freedoms, right? So I'm not going to cover the whole event with Trump fake assassination attempt, because this video is already way too long, and I haven't, I got another half of it to make today, so it's going to be a long video. It's going to encompass a bunch of different things. But there is something very provable about Trump acting, which is undisputable. I usually can't prove things in terms of evidence and improves like facts, right? But it's a fact that Trump wore a maxi pad to the inauguration and didn't need to do it, and lied about it, and lied about numerous things in the video clips that I'm about to show you. So let's blow through that quickly. An understanding about acting and faking. If somebody lies about one thing, then everything that person does and everything to do with that specific thing is in question. And so Trump's ear cut was non-existent. When this thing happened, I heard about it, my wife and then I said, and I tuned into the news, and it was all over the news, a big story, right? The story that, that weekend. I believe it happened on a Saturday. And Trump, the big part of what made this special for Trump, and I said, oh, this is WWE. My wife's like, are you sure there's like blood? I'm like, no, it's fake, and whatever. Like, that's what made it fake, the blood. Like, this was a WWE. Like, I'd watched something about old-time wrestling, before I watched these documentaries years and years ago. And they used to have a saying, red is green. So if you bleed, they'll give you a lot more money for, your match. Because blood was something the audience liked, like real blood. Of course, Trump, didn't want to have the stomach to get his ear cut. But having that fake blood, and then him getting up and saying, fight, 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 that's where he got it. Like, that was what made it special. Where even, like, Cenk Iyengar was saying, from Young Turks was saying that was badass. Like, all these people were praising Trump, Democrats, for the fight, 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 even though nothing happened. He didn't get shot, right? It was all fake, because Trump isn't a tough guy. But him getting up and pumping his fists and mouthing the words fight, fight, fight was the big thing. But we know let's start here with the interview with Joe Rogan.
Right over here.
Oh, it's a tiny little
See,
mark.
it zicked right there.
Yeah. But it healed up pretty fucking good.
Well, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's a little.
No, you didn't
it's
get
a little
cauliflower
bit.
ear.
No. The point of the bullet was a
Boy.
little of the ass, but you see the thing's taken off a little bit.
Okay, for a timeline for this thing, I'm not going to cover all the inconsistencies and all the things about the way that the Secret Service completely failed and let Trump head be exposed. The crowd not running away, which Trump talks about in this interview. I'm not even going to show you that part, even though we just saw with what happened with the shooting for Charlie Kirk. The crowd just panicked and ran. Everybody ran. That didn't happen with Trump. It was almost like they didn't even hear gunshots, right? So, my wife thinks it's like CGI. But, the timeline is he gets shot on Saturday. Then Sunday they talk about it. And then Monday's the convention. And then Thursday he comes out with Hulk Hogan, and he accepts the nomination. And he comes out with this big giant maxi pad, which I already showed you once, and we'll show you that again. And so Trump addresses that here.
How's your ear?
Good. Getting much better. We're getting down to the
Small bandages, right?
bandages.
He says small bandages. So we saw with Joe Rogan, he claims that the bullet nicked him right here, right? And there was a report from Trump's doctor that the cut was less than 2 centimeters, but there was no cut at all. Like, he didn't have a cut. Like, he gets up and his blood's dry. We'll talk about that briefly here. And so there was a non-existent cut, right? When he stood up, there was no blood dripping from his ear. They had put whatever ketchup. I called this ketchup gate, but it was like some fake blood on his ear. And he got up. I mean, this is staged, whatever it is. And like this is a like scripted type of thing. So he gets up, He has this weird conversation with them. They let him expose his head. He walks to his car. All a Secret Service fail. But then he goes to the hospital, and there's no longer a cut there. So, maybe they want to check him out, whatever. Maybe he's got some bruises, he had these guys on top of him, which is going to talk about here. But it didn't need stitches because it's already sealed up, right? I get cut doing farm work all the time. And sometimes I'll wrap a paper towel around if I have to go in and get a Band-Aid. I'm out in the farm area and I have to go in to get a Band-Aid, whatever. And, it either stops bleeding, initially or within an hour or two. I clean it up, wash it up. And it was more, and of course he didn't have any cut at all. And it's no big deal. Like, I won't even tell my wife I got cut, unless it's bleeding, more than other ones. But unless something needs stitches, you just go back to your job, right? Like, people play sports, you get cut, you do things, you get cut. You have a little bit of blood, slap a Band-Aid on it. Whatever, keep the dirt out, keep the steel, stop it from bleeding. I put some cayenne pepper and stuff if it's bleeding a lot. And avoid stitches, right? But he didn't need any stitches. His own doctor said that. So it was a non-existent cut. It was like, in fact, there was nothing there, but let's say there was, right? Let's say he had a cut there. He didn't need this fucking maxi pad. So he puts this on because it's performance, right? We now know from the Joe Rogan thing, we know from his doctor, we know there's no stitches. We know that the cut's located right up here on the top part. So he's got this cut, on the top of his ear. Like, that's what they're saying, the official story. If you want to believe what he's saying, sure, go ahead. But we know that he didn't need any of these things, right? He didn't need this big-ass bandage. So this is performative. That's all you need to know, that he wore this thing as a performance because of the, getting up and pumping his fist and saying, fight, fight, fight. They wanted to make it look bigger than it was. But I was waiting for when they took this bandage off because I knew there was going to be nothing there. Because I could tell from the earlier pictures that there was just some blood on there. There doesn't seem to be a wound anywhere, right? There's nothing missing. And so he eventually goes to this. This is from the Jesse Walters thing. But he didn't need anything over his complete ear. In fact, you can't hear. He didn't need a bandage at all because there was nothing there. But if he got out and showed everybody that his ear was intact and there wasn't even a cut or a scar, like Joe Rogan showed you, there's nothing there. And so putting on that giant maxi pad, which will, from the convention, we rolled out and came out during the convention, was 100% stagecraft. It was 100% political theater. Because we know he didn't need a bandage. That's a fact, right? We didn't know we know he didn't even need this. Because the thing, this is a week later. And if he goes on Jesse Waters and he shows up with no cut at all, and they're like, why are you wearing that fucking maxi pad, you pussy, right? Like the kind of guy that goes out and puts on a cast because he slightly might have sprained his wrist and his buddies all call him a pussy, right? Because, you know what I mean? This is what I'm talking about. Like, there was nothing there, non-existent. Like, Joe Rogan's even kind of mocking him. But nobody wants to call bullshit. But we know this is bullshit. We know this is bullshit right here. He didn't need the bandage. We know the maxi pad is bullshit, right? That he didn't need either one of those things. And so, if that's fake, if he's willing to act and stagecraft and perform and exaggerate his non-existent cut on his ear, then what else is he faking? The whole thing is in question. And it should be because, all the other parts of it are fake as fuck, right? He's acting. This is a staged event. It's a WWE-style event, poorly executed. But what happens is people will think, well, the Democrats will call it out, or the media will call it out, or the Secret Service wouldn't have done this. Why would they agree to doing a fake assassination attempt, right? Why would they be a part of that? Were those people actors? So, it's like people think it's too complicated to pull off, but they do these things all the time. And even if it's an organic event, it becomes staged because they roll out. They use the organic event as a way to roll out an agenda. So, let's say Charlie Kirk was actually assassinated, which I believe to be the case. I think he was actually shot. but maybe not. They could have been faked. Like, this is what I'm saying. We'll never be able to. Some things you never be able to prove. But we do know without a shadow of a doubt, Trump didn't need that maxi pad. Like, does anybody disagree with that? That's watching this, would be any disagree anywhere that he didn't need the maxi pad? He didn't need that big ass bandage over his entire ear. When this was the only part that was possibly cut, he said it's a little bit of a nick, and this was what he did here. That he didn't need this one either. A week later.
Yeah, but it was a nasty one, and it was a nasty period. That was exactly 1 week ago from today, exactly. And
so it doesn't take, it takes hours for a cut to heal up like that, a small nick, right? The kind of cut he was talking about with Joe Rogan. It takes hours. Like, you guys all know that. Unless you're like a hemophiliac or somebody, who has trouble with this. But when he stood up, the blood was dry. Like, I examined all the photos, the videos. When he walks off the stage, the blood's already dry. It's not on his, when you see the pictures, it's not on his pants, it's not on his shirt, it's not anywhere. Like, it's nowhere. Like, he's got no blood other than a little trickle down his face, and then it's dry. He's not bleeding when he stands up and walks to the car. And so, and we know it's a non-existent cut because of what he said on Joe Rogan. Like, even with that, the bleeding had stopped, and that was it. He didn't need a bandage at all. And you wouldn't have, putting a bandage on your ear is difficult. But he had to do this because if you saw what it looked like, you would have been like, you made such a big deal out of that, right? Like, because there wouldn't be anything there. Like, right now, there's nothing under this Band-Aid. And I said, if you guys were watching my videos, I have a whole playlist on this. But I said I was waiting for them to take the bandage off because I knew there was nothing there, right? And if Trump was committed to the performance, like the WWE guys are, he would have had them take off a chunk of his ear. Because then it would have looked like a bullet, and it would be hard to dispute that. Even though, it would have been fake, but he just too much of a pussy to do any damage to his body. So they didn't do anything to his ear. There's nothing there.
when you think about it, that's been a lot of territory covered. Who would have thought this was going to be happening? But it happened, and
the people who wrote in and scripted it, right?
I got very lucky, or God. I think it was God, actually.
Who are like, why is the president wearing an ear bandage? He got shot in the ear, and these are the same people who are wearing masks, right, 5 years after COVID, so it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, okay, so this guy does an interview last night, which I'll cover towards the end of this video. It's horrific. J.D. Vance is such a piece of shit, pushing for basically martial law and censorship and the rest of this, right? And this fucking guy, man, this guy.
When you were down by the podium, we heard a lot of kerfuffle. You said something about shoes.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, they wanted to put me on a stretcher. They had a stretcher, and they wanted to put me on a stretcher. And I said, I'm not going on a stretcher, because I just felt it was the ear. And there was a lot of blood coming. I don't know if you've heard this, but the ear causes, they say, the most in the body. You get hit.
People were commenting in my videos about ear injuries where they had a lot of blood. But Trump's blood was dry when he gets up, right? And so...
Ear. Better than just about any other place in one way, but in another way it bleeds more. And there was a lot of blood, but I understood. They thought I was hit elsewhere. They thought I was hit actually in this area. And I wasn't. I said, I'm telling you, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm going to get up. I want to get up. I'm not going to be taken out on a stretcher. We had a little argument. Well, I have 6 guys lying on top of me. I mean, I had some big guys on top.
There's no argument. When this kind of thing happens, Secret Service run the show, and you're like a puppet. They manhandle you, and the whole thing is not to allow your head to get exposed. They let Trump get up. There could have been a second shooter, all that shit, right? Like, even people like Joe Scarborough, I mean, the massive failure of the Secret Service. Because it was a stage-acted event, right? But even if they were rehearsing, like if they were doing this as a way to like a fire drill, you're supposed to do it right. There was, his head was exposed in his body to a second shooter in the audience. The guys on stage hadn't fully identified what was going on. There's so much fake shit going on. But I'm focusing on the one thing we can prove, which is the ear, right? And the fact that he's lying about the blood.
Of me. Yeah. The strong guys too, I can tell you that by the wrist. The wrist had a little little work on it. And brave guys, because they ran onto that stage very quickly. I was down for the most part because when I looked at my hand, I knew it was something very serious. I put my hand up, I looked at it, it had blood all over it. But I had a lot of big, strong humans on top of me.
So here it is on C-SPAN.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next president of the United States.
So here he comes walking out with this fucking maxi pad on, which we now know, right? We should know with the Joe Rogan interview, the thing with Jesse Walters. He didn't need to cover his whole ear, right? And there are people in the audience wearing patches like this, like as part of it. So this is staged. This is staging. This is all political theater. This is after Hulk Hogan gave his WWE thing. And I had said, this is WWE. I had no idea that Trump had been on WWE with Vince McMahon. People started sending me clips. I hadn't watched the Netflix doc where they show that whole thing with Tim and Vince McMahon. I didn't know he was going to put Linda McMahon as Secretary of the Education. I didn't know they was going to roll out Hulk Hogan, the now deceased Hulk Hogan, as part of his show, or Dana White was going to give the introduction to him, and that Kid Rock was going to perform. It was so fucking low brow, low consciousness, low vibration, and this is fake as fuck, right? This is fake.
Donald J. Trump.
We're going to play this BS song, bullshit song. And they're going to come out with the fight, fight, fight thing, right? See, fight, bumping his fist, fight, fight, fight. See, he's got his fist in the air. Remember the fight, fight, fight thing? Here it is, right? Just unnecessary. All this stuff. He comes in, this thing. And, all the rest of it. So this was, him being introduced, and then there's the speech he gives and all the rest of it. And he got to give that speech with this patch on his ear, right? That this is the night of the speech. Here he is with this lying piece of shit and his sack of shit family and all these things. Because they're lying to his supporters and independent voters. Like, he wasn't lying to the Democrats. He wasn't lying to the media. They all know this is horseshit. They know, they know because they fake their own things. And so nobody called bullshit on this. I was surprised to find out my viewer said, you're the only one talking about this being fake. You guys can go back and see my whole playlist. I covered it. All the truthers who, if this was Joe Biden, they all would have said it was fake. It was so obviously WWE-style. And him going for the blood on the ear, because if they just shoot at him, it's like, all right, that's, you have some victim consciousness, you have some self-righteousness. They kill a couple people around him in the audience, whatever. That's if that's the story, it's not so great. What made this thing pop, and again, it's disappeared. People don't talk about it because it was so fake, right? It had no legs. Like the fake ones just disappear when it's really fake. But the fact that he went for the blood on the ear, the fake blood, the ketchup gate, right? And then I call this ketchup gate and Band-Aid gate. And the fact that he went for the blood on the ear, and then he went for, the getting up and pumping his fists and yelling, fight, fight, fight. That turned it into him being a badass. Like that was the WWE stuff. That rallies the crowd, rallies the dumbass, rallies the low vibrational dumb fucks out there, right? And so this is, which all of it, when this happened, it made all of it like fake. All the whole thing, everything that you see here in his campaign, and it made him fake, right? That he was willing to stage something like this when an election he was already going to win. And that nobody covered it. I mean, I'm talking about truthers in the truth community. And, people like Charlie Kirk and all these people who say, that talk about his assassination, they all became compromised, Tucker Carlson, whatever. They have no credibility. Because everybody should be able to see this as fake. And now people are talking about it. But I was stunned. One of my viewers said that they watched 60 different truthers, something around 60, and only 3 of them were talking about it might being fake weeks after it happened. Like I was the only person to call this out because it was so WWE, right? But we know that he didn't need this. Like this is a prop. This is stage crap. This is, I mean, this maxi pad in his fucking ear, right? Okay, so it says here, Joe Biden, you're fired, right? And I went for a walk with my dogs. I just want to add this to it. Not so much this video clip, but just, well, here's what he says.
Something that said, take a look at what happened.
Okay, so go back a second here. See, his hand comes down. There's no blood on his hand, right? Like he's touched his ear, and he looks at his hand, right? This is what he said. I looked at my hand. I don't know if he thought that they were going to try to add blood later, CGI. But he went all over the place and said that he looked at his hand and there was blood everywhere. There's no blood there. There's zero blood. There's nothing there, right? And so there's shots being fired, multiple shots. And he did this weird thing like that, but nobody really reacts. They didn't react. The crowd doesn't react like the Utah crowd. And Trump bragged about this guy right here particularly as everyone went down, like, what's happening, right? Because the Secret Service runs up on stage. But nobody ran. Like, so there was people in the crowd, your normal reaction is, oh, shit, there's bullets flying. And Trump said it was because they loved him so much. I mean, he said that in the Jesse Walters interview. I'm not going to go show you that. But, going back to this thing with, there's no blood here. So there's multiple things that he said in his story that didn't add up. But then he goes on Joe Rogan and he has this non-existent cut. And you find out that he needed no stitches. I found all this stuff out. He went to the hospital, but the blood had already dried. There was no reason for a bandage at all, right? And so let's say everything is true but that everything else happened, this happened, some guy shot, all the stuff, the official story. Of course, it's all of it is very, there's holes in the story. It's like a Swiss cheese story. But let's say everything is true but that. They make the decision to exaggerate his wound and play on the audience because he can't show up at the convention and pump his fist and, just to survive assassination attempt and see his ear and there's nothing there, right? Because, it's ketchup, like it's fake blood. He gets up, there's stuff that's on there, it's already dry, which is weird. And it's not, when he gets up, there's nothing on his shirt, there's nothing anywhere, like I said. And so what that means is they're shitting all over patriots and patriotism and the American dream and the American right-wing things that he did. They're stagecrafting it, the fight stuff, because they're rolling him out like he's a wounded Army veteran. Right? He's a commander-in-chief, or he will be. He was once, and he's going to be again. And this is a guy who's just taken a bullet in his ear. He's out there at the convention. And it's just so the timing of it, just like the timing with this with this Charlie Kirk thing, it's perfect timing, like just right before the convention. So when he rolls out with that maxi pad on his ear, he's shitting all over the American, the Fox News watching right-wing conservative people, and manipulating them with a fake bandage, right? So. It's the same thing I'm talking about with Charlie Kirk and his wife with their story and, her coming out and giving that weird eulogy, whatever the fuck that was, setting up, all the stagecraft that went into that. And because, you're faking some of it, you're faking all of it. Like you have compromised this story, right? You're exaggerating this story and you're pretending to be something, a wounded person when you're not, right? And you're exaggerating your injuries and things like this. So much so that, the whole thing is questioned. And the whole thing should be questioned because it's fake as fuck, right? It's WWE stuff. But then all these other things that they're now implementing, martial law, all the stuff they're doing, if he's willing to deceive his supporters like this and play on their emotional strings, because they're people who love him, the people that put all their faith and hope in him, right? All the right-wing people. He's a guy who's finally saying the things that, he's finally a guy who gets it, and he's saying the things that they want to hear. And they, their hope is in this guy. And they almost killed him, and they feel they're crying. People are at home, Republicans and Trump supporters are crying, and they're freaked out by this. And he's fucking playing them and manipulating them then everything else is fucking shit. This guy's, a piece of shit that won't, that's lying to his own people and manipulating them in this way, right? And this really poorly done stagecraft. And the people who kind of all sense now that it's fake because they don't ever talk about this anymore. They brought it up a little bit with Charlie Kirk, but it's like the Charlie Kirk thing it's way more realistic and way more, he's him being dead and all these things, and they're rolling out, all this stuff, this restriction, and they're getting rid of people's freedoms, all the stuff that they're now doing, right? But I think that, what people don't care if things are real anymore. They're like, I don't care if it's fake. People are like, there's the blurred line between reality and contrived stuff, between movies and reality, between reality TV and show and reality. Like, it's just, people don't care anymore. They know WWE is fake, but they still get emotionally invested. They know they're being manipulated emotionally and scripted. I talked about the Netflix documentaries on WWE stuff and how they know how to manipulate their audience. And their audience knows it's fake, but gets manipulated and feels emotional reactions. And they want to go along with the crowd, and they all are these, zombies just cheering on shit that's really remedial, really stupid, and really fake, right? And obviously fake. All right, so let's go to the stuff about Israel's motives for the Charlie Kirk thing, keeping all this in mind. Okay, so we still haven't found the motive from this gay dude who was sleeping with the trans dude in Utah. There doesn't seem to be any motive other than him just being a liberal and watching liberal videos, right? Whereas there is a motive here, which we've talked about in terms of Israel and Charlie Kirk, parting ways. So this happened a month before.
And have defended Israel since the beginning of this conflict and spoken out about the anti-Semitism that has erupted on these college campuses many times. And something's happening, though, with this whole debate that is really bothering me, and I wonder if you're feeling it too. So I genuinely believe you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody in the public eye who's been as outspoken a defender of not every move Israel's taken in the war, but of Israel's right to defend itself and of the just backward awfulness that we've been seeing on college campuses and the backlash against American Jews.
Okay, so, Israel kills maybe up to 300,000 people. I'll see if I can find that. I don't know, somebody sent me this, possibly my wife or something. But the numbers are really a lot worse than people think. So there's something I have somewhere. It's either on one of these two bars. I'll see if I can find it. Or I'll just search for it. But there's someone estimating that there's as many as 300,000 Palestinians dead. They've entered Gaza City. Now, again, this is what Israel wanted to do all along. Israel is going to own Palestine, is going to own all of Palestine, and is going to own Gaza, right? So that's going to happen, right? And what I said, and I haven't been covering this. I've never wanted to go and be one of these Israel people who covered Israel, because I don't care about all this stuff, and everybody's got everyone's got blood on their hands, right? In terms of the system, it's a demonic system, and there's these power groups, and there's a lot of people that just blame the Jews for everything, right? They just, and I don't want those people on my channel like thinking I'm one of them, truthers who blame the Jews, in air quotes for everything. I have, grew up with a lot of Jewish people, friends. My dad had 2 friends in college because they were prejudiced against him because he was Sicilian, he was Italian, and Albanian, right? He was ethnic. He went to Rutgers, and he had 2 Jewish friends. They were out because the Jews and Italians were looked down on in the 30s or whatever. My dad went to college, right? And he had these 2 Jewish guys who were his friends. He liked, vaudeville. I mean, this is years and years ago, old school entertainment. My dad grew up in the, those old days. So my family, one of my basketball buddies, me and him put together a Y team, a YMCA team, in my second attempt at college. He grew up in the same town that I did, but on, there was 2 high schools in West Hartford, Connecticut, and he went to the other one. So I never, I didn't know him when I lived there when I was a kid, but in college we put together a YMCA team. We used to play basketball at the same pickup court. He's the only person that still contacts me from my friends from my past. And he watches his show occasionally. His son is doing truther stuff. Like he sent me an essay from his son. He's a Jewish guy. He didn't have a car at times, and I'd drive him over to his grandparents' house. Nice people. He'd take care of them. But, not really somebody like I wasn't a Catholic and he wasn't, his friends used to make fun of him for being Jewish, but it was just, like, I don't think he ever went to synagogue or any of these things, right? And so, the guy who started me doing Saj Marg is an old Jewish hippie, the one who, my meditation that I do. And so I have connection with Jewish people, and, so I don't have any prejudice against really anybody based in their ethnicity. I don't care about this stuff. I mean, there is some stereotypes that true about ethnicities, but, I don't deal in any of those things because, people are so goofy about all that stuff, right? People are just so eager to hate. So I never really covered this, but, I covered it with 9/11, and I got some pushback. I talked about Israel's possible role in 9/11, back when I made those videos. I think these were, there's some great videos of the big event 2001. But, I liked mine because of some of the things I had in there that other people didn't have. And I covered the third video, Israel's possible involvement. And some guys showed up on my channel, a few people, and were, they were being kind of goofy about it, and I was like, well, they certainly have their team of people. Because I haven't said shit about this, and all of a sudden some people show up, and they're trying to be friendly, but, persuasive, and I guess getting me to take the video down or something, right? So this is years and years ago. So, but there are established narratives, but there is this statement out there that you can find out who your owners are, who owns you, by looking at the people you can't criticize. And there's pretty much nothing in America that you can't criticize. I mean, Trump is trying to push for people not to criticize him and call that a hate crime. But the biggest pushback you get as a celebrity is when you criticize Israel. And as a politician. They just destroy you. They make it, there's a woman, Cynthia McKinney, African-American woman, she was one of the few people that asked Rumsfeld where all the Pentagon money, it was like $9 billion or $9 trillion disappeared on September 10th, 2001. And she was one of the few people to ask him about, where the money went. And she said that she did not want to sign the pledge to defend Israel. That Israel had a right to defend. There's a pledge that all these politicians have to sign. And Israel took her seat. They dumped $1 million into her opponent's campaign, and she lost. You can find videos about this, probably still up on YouTube. But this is something that exists. They don't let you, as any of these people, especially these people who have supported them at one time, criticize them. And they certainly aren't going to let American kids call the mass murder a genocide, the genocide that they are doing on the Palestinian people. It's a fucking genocide, right? And fuck anybody who says it isn't, right? Because, you're just murdering innocent people. And, Israel's big claim to fame is that they haven't had a homeland, and wherever they go, people beat the shit out of them and kill them, and they've never been able to be safe and at peace. And there's only like 12 million, 16 million, 12 million of Jewish people in the world, and that the Holocaust happened, and so therefore they have to be vigilant about their defense. But if you're going to criticize people if you're going to, claim the Holocaust victim consciousness about the Holocaust, then you can't go to do the same thing to the Palestinian people. You can't do ethnic cleansing to the Palestinian people because there's 2 million people in Palestine. And this guy, this motherfucker right here, was talking about moving them to Jordan or Egypt and pressuring those two countries to take in, 18 million or 1.8 million people who, outnumber the people in that country, what used to be called Palestine. And so, why would you be doing that in the first fucking place? Why would you be going against people saying shit on the campus? Because these guys were both shills for Israel, right? And they pretend to be truthers, but, they're getting paid and they're getting love because they are doing this, right? They're getting support from Israel.
Then yours truly. I mean, I have been at the pointy end of the spear on this, and
I completely agree with that.
And it was all heartfelt, and it remains heartfelt.
Yes.
Except, whatever money you were getting, right? He's saying it's heartfelt too. But Candace Owens said this guy, Israel was, he was getting defunded. He was getting money from Israel, which we know. But she came out and said she worked with him. So she said that he started to get defunded. So we'll get to that in a moment.
However, my contention here is that some in the pro-Israel camp are so knee-jerk about calling you anti-Semitic or getting deeply offended if you say...
Watch his face here.
Knee-jerk about calling you anti-Semitic or getting...
Yeah, so it's a month ago, right? A month ago.
Deeply offended if you say anything that doesn't align with their narrative, that it undermines their own cause. And I have to tell you, I find it very irritating because I do feel like some of us have earned the right to have some credibility.
What do you mean you earn the right? You earn the right? You earn the right for some credibility? What's the fucking, you earned it? You earned it because you have to work for them. You have to show those guys, those, Netanyahu and the Israeli leadership and lobby and the money, people that, dump money into these kind of channels and promote them on YouTube and other places. You've earned the right to criticize them. You've earned the right to criticize them. You've earned the right to say something that doesn't fucking 100% positive about Israel. You have to earn that fucking right. As an American citizen with freedom of speech, you have to earn. Listen to this fucking bitch, right?
Their own cause. And I have to tell you, I find it very irritating because I do feel like some of us have earned the right to have some credibility on the subject of Israel and don't want to be called those names.
What do you mean? You have to earn the right to have credibility because all you do is say, praise them and defend their genocide because you fucking, that blood money you take for defending that genocide. Like the world's going to fucking collapse. Like I talk about this all the time. Like I don't care. Like, there's just a lot of evil. There's evil is run amok because we're going against God's will. Like we systemically. People aren't connected to God and don't listen to God and all these things. All the things I talk about this over and over again. And so, that's all there. But you earn the right to, some credibility on the subject of Israel by years and years of just carrying water for them and defending them and allowing them to do all this fucking horrific shit, right? And take American taxpayer dollars and bribe our politicians and bomb the USS Liberty and, and leave give $6 million, $1 for every person who died in the Holocaust, which is a total dickish move. And whatever contribution they did on the whole five dancing Israelis and all the shit that's out there. They're not your friend. Like, they have their own country. And you can see what the way they treat people who just dare to, who, get paid by them. And, of course, that makes sense too, right? Well, of course they are. They're paying you to say nice things about it. But as soon as you waver from 100% positive talk, this is what they do, right?
And we have some mild pushback on some of the overreaches, whether it's whether they're winning or losing the propaganda war right now. And my contention is they've begun to lose it. And I realize it's propaganda coming at us from Hamas, but
there's no propaganda from Hamas. Hamas has nothing. Hamas is more than likely an Israeli asset, which I've said just for the same reason that, who benefits from every time Hamas does something, the Hamas holes, Israel benefits. Every time Hamas does something, they're the ultimate straw man. When Israel wants to do something to the Palestinian people, Hamas acts out and does something that Israel wants them to do. Gives the provocation for Israel to go in there, beat the shit out of them, and murder their kids and kill the people and starve them and, shut off their water and all the human rights violations that they do. Do you think they didn't want to do that? If is that they're just defending themselves? Come on. There is no Hamas. Hamas is part of Israel. It's an Israeli asset, just like ISIS and Al-Qaeda were an American asset, right? This is well documented that they use these groups to create provocation. When you have a superior military force, the Palestinians have no military. You just can't go and beat the shit out of people. America just can't go around the world with our superior military force and beat the shit out of people for no reason. I mean, we can, but we not if you don't want to sound like the evil empire. And there's so much pushback, and there could be financial sanctions and the rest of it. So what they have to do is create a false flag event where somebody attacks America, and then we can go in and take what we want, right? So America does this, Israel does it, Great Britain, England used to do it. You have France, all these countries, right? These countries did it in Libya and these other places, these other African countries. They'd create fake terrorists like Trump is trying to do now with the liberals. They murdered Charlie Kirk, and so let's go take everybody's rights to free speech or whatever it might be. So it's when you have superior military force and no one in their right mind. Are you going to go to the zoo and jump into the cage with the lions or tigers and punch them in the face? You're going to walk up to a tiger and punch it in the face? What do you think's going to happen, right? Or some, big giant frickin', killer, like some, ex-con guy works with you, and you're going to walk up and start a fight with the guy, and some MMA guy, whatever it is. Like, you're going to get your ass kicked, right? Nobody does that. People know when they're going to get killed. Like, do you go stick your hand in a bee's nest? I mean, like, people do that shit, but only crazy people, right? Because no one wants to get stung, and no one wants to get hurt. And so when you're going to get your ass kicked, like Palestine is, why would the Palestinian people do anything to provoke Israel, who wants to take their fucking land, right? And so it's just silly.
Numbers have turned here in America. They've turned, not so much with Republicans, a little bit with Republicans, but completely with the Democrat Party and with independents. They have shifted mightily from at least double digits highs to single digit lows now when it comes to approval. And also with respect to, you and I speculated about this at the Turning Point event, whether the possibility of Jeffrey Epstein possibly being a Mossad agent or asset.
Okay, so what's happened is these guys belong to a Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and a lot of other people I don't know group. This level of truther, like people who are really right-wing Republican, mainstream, part of the show, receiving big money from whatever groups that control, they're not independent people, are just telling the truth. But they have been slammed with lots of people, on their guests on their shows and other people who are all aware that Jeffrey Epstein had to have, he got this cushy deal where when he was convicted, he got to choose. Remember, Ghislaine Maxwell, there was a letter that came out from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. And he's asking, should he be convicted of sexually assaulting a minor or lewd and lascivious conduct or whatever it's called, right? And she's like, lewd conduct? He didn't even know which was worse, right? Like that motherfucker. But they were giving him a choice. He could plead guilty to one or the other, and he was going to be on work release, basically going home every day, sleeping in prison at night, and he was able to work. And he got it so not only would he never be persecuted for his crimes again, he got immunity, but all the people that he went and came to him would also not be prosecuted. I mean, that's the kind of deal he got. And the only reason you get that kind of a deal, there's a couple of movies where one of them is Barry Seal, the guy who dealt cocaine, flew cocaine in airplanes for the CIA to fund the Iran-Contra and other things. He was selling drugs for the CIA so they could fund their off-the-book operations. And he got busted. He said, "You're about to get a phone call from somebody, and I'm going to walk out of here in 2 minutes." And they're like all laughing at him. And the phone rings, and it's like Bill Clinton or somebody. And he's telling these guys to let him go, right? And that's the kind of guy Jeffrey Epstein is. So Jeffrey Epstein was working for and was, had power over, whether it was Bill Clinton and Donald Trump or a number of people, but he was working for either the CIA and more likely Mossad. I mean, he was working for Mossad because some of his money is traced back to these people, right? The same people that are funding these motherfuckers. And so, like they know that. And so they're being pressured. These two shills are being pressured because they keep on saying the same stupid shit. And then they know what's going on. And they're bought and sold by Israel. They're getting money from Israel. They're getting, Israel holds power over these two shills. And their audience is like, Jesus Christ, you guys you're so wrong on this, right?
Or affiliated with, that's been turned around on me too, to you must be anti-Semitic. What the hell? That's such bullshit. The same people who say you can criticize Israel, that's fine, we won't call you anti-Semitic if you criticize Israel, now turn around immediately and say you're anti-Semitic for even raising that. I completely reject that. And I raise this as a pushback against my friends on that particular strain of the aisle to watch it, because you don't want to alienate people who are openly your friends by going nuts in your crackdowns on mild pushback on anything related to Israel. Now you take it.
I'm so glad you brought this up, and I would
remember a month ago.
Second that, Megan. I think I have a bulletproof resume showing my defense of Israel, both on campus, on social media, to great, let's just say mockery and scorn at times, because I believe it.
Right? Mockery and scorn at times, right? Because he's getting slammed. He's getting slammed by his supporters who love him on everything else, but realize he's owned by Israel, because he is owned by Israel, right?
I believe in the scriptural land rights given to Israel. I believe in.
Okay, so let's stop there, and I'm going to come back to this. I want to show you the thing on Candace Owens. So this guy believes in the scriptural land rights, right? So he's talking about is the promised land. Now, the Old Testament's a bullshit book. The New Testament is Jesus' teachings, which is much more sophisticated, isn't a great book in terms of it's an entry-level book into understanding some spiritual concepts. It was brilliant for that time and for the people he's teaching to, but it isn't like, it's a good book. But the Old Testament, the Israeli half, is just God is presented as a wrathful, angry, narcissistic piece of shit. Like he's just, telling Abraham to sacrifice his only son. I mean, this kind of stuff. Human sacrifices, animal sacrifices, all these things that they were doing, all this stuff. And it's primitive shit, and it isn't God. It's a demon that they're worshiping. So it's a shitty book. Jesus graduated from his religion. Jesus was born in a religion, like many of us, and then he went and became spiritual. So religions, God is outside of you. A spiritual person finds the divinity within them and connects with it. That's what Jesus did. And that's his brilliance. The kingdom of heaven is within. And so all this other bullshit that they've pushed, all these narratives that they've pushed, Jesus is the only Son of God, Jesus died for your sins, all the Old Testament, that's all garbage. The one teaching, at least one of the teachings, I don't know all of Jesus' teachings, but the one that is, that should be celebrated is the kingdom of heaven is within you. You look inside, you find divinity inside, right? But one of these teachings in the Old Testament is that God promised promised Jews the land of Israel. And so these Christians, these dopey Christians, believe in that. And it's, not fair. So what he's talking about here is this. These are the scriptural rights of Israel, right? Saudi Arabia, Lebanon. Here's Israel right now. So this is part of Israel, and this is part of it. The Gaza Strip's in here somewhere, right? But this is the old map of Israel. And so if he's talking about the biblical rights, the scriptural rights, because just because you write in a book doesn't mean shit. See, you've never heard, people haven't heard anybody else talk about the Old Testament this way. People reject the Bible, or they're atheists, liberals, and they'll say, well, God, there's a lot of bullshit in the book, just like there's a lot of bullshit in like the Mormon tradition. There's a lot of weird shit in the Mahabharata and these other books. There's a lot of weird shit in the Quran and all these religious texts. A lot of them are primitive. They were written thousands of years ago, most of it. And so they're goofy, and a lot of it doesn't make sense, and it's not factual, and they're not, some of it's just weird, right? And every religion's weird, but your religion. And so atheists go, yeah, this stuff doesn't, the Bible is bullshit, so God must be bullshit. That's a bunch of dopey Americans that figured that, like that. But, the Bible was something written for. Jesus' teachings and the Old Testament was written for primitive people thousands of years ago. And there's good stuff in it, and there's bad stuff, like anything else. And it's a manipulative tool to control people. But there is divinity, and divinity is sophisticated. And the teachings in the Sajmark system, many of them are sublime. I mean, if you get to read the books, there's free books on there. Some of them are online. I talk about that. If you go to my Gratefullness meditation, I talk about where you can read some of the books online. But they're sophisticated and subliminal, and they talk about God as the essence of love. Like God doesn't have a mind. God can't have a mind. God can't have an ego, because God can't have a personality. God is an individual. God is an essence of love. It's, God is God can't have an ego and make decisions and a mind to think, because God would then make mistakes, right? God can't have choices. God has to be either perfect or there is no God, right? God can't make, mistakes like we can make mistakes. So there can be God doesn't have the freedom to do wrong, which is very sophisticated teaching. It's a higher level understanding of God, right? Whereas they said God is a king because that's all they knew. But in these books, these primitive books, these books that are full of bullshit, they say that God promised the land of Israel to the Jews. And that's written by Jews, right? It's written by Jewish people. And so what if I wrote a book saying God promised me the world, right? Then I wouldn't do that. So somebody else would, but whatever, And so this is what Israel is. It's part of Egypt. Remember that this guy, Charlie Kirk, wants the Egyptians to take the Palestinians in. But this is prime land. So Israel already has a little bit of land here on the coast, beautiful Mediterranean Sea, vacation paradise. There's like oil and natural gas out here that they want to harvest from, right outside Gaza Strip. But then they would get all this land here, this valuable seafront property that's Egypt's, and they'd also get all this Red Sea land. They would get all the oil that's here in Saudi Arabia and Iraq. They get half of Iraq. They get all this, land in Syria that also has natural resources, Lebanon, and some of Turkey. And I don't know what this. Then they get some of the Persian Gulf, and they could get a little bit of land over here on this side from Iran, right? So they get all of Iraq and a little bit of Iran. And so that's what Charlie Kirk is saying. He believes in the biblical rights that Israel's entitled to this land because some bullshit thing in the Bible. And partly he says this, maybe he believes it, but partly because they gave him a shit ton of money. Let's go to this Candace Owen thing.
What's going on? They're like trying to make you think you're going crazy because you're saying some sensible stuff. Charlie was at that moment.
Okay, so she's talking about how I think she worked for Charlie. They worked together. And then she went off on her own. And she criticized Israel, and they called her anti-Semitic. So I kind of was sort of aware of this, right? Again, a lot of these guys, they are going in the right direction in some cases. Like Tucker Carlson is better than he was 10 years ago. Joe Rogan, I don't know, whatever he's been. Candace Owens is better than she was, a couple years ago, right? But that doesn't mean they're good. Like, yeah, it's good that you're going in the right direction on some of these things. But anyway, she's talking about this, that she left this behind her, this pro-Israeli shit, and that they went after her. And that Charlie started to experience the same thing.
He says that he is receiving messages calling him an anti-Semite. So how can you lie right now and dispute it? And better question, why are you lying? I don't like little lies. I'm being contacted by a lot of people that are telling me that just within 48 hours before Charlie passed away, his top Jewish donors were pulling funding from him, demanding that Charlie take their name off of the building that they had donated to Turning Point.
Okay, so Charlie had Jewish donors, according to her. Now she would know because she worked with him, and they had. So this is kind of widely known. I've been talking about this. It's not written about, but he was talking about Israel in a way Israel loved him, and Netanyahu talked about how he loved him. But she's hearing, and again, this is her having relationships with people over there because she worked there. That 48 hours before he was killed, they were pulling funding from him, right? And so he was funded by Israel. And so let's go a little bit farther here.
I guess I can figure out who that is, how many people could have donated a building. And then once Charlie was killed, they said, never mind, put it back on the building. Okay? Charlie himself had alluded to a tremendous loss of money coming in, and we'll speak about that more. More people are going to come out with information. This is all.
Okay, so he was bought and paid for by Israel. So all these people are Charlie Kirk fans. You can't, he was being paid by a foreign country. And he was going to college campuses where these kids were waking up, and they were upset about, rightfully so, about a genocide. And they don't have the skills and the knowledge. He's a 35-year-old man who's been, a figure who has debating skills. And, he has a stage in there. They're coming to him as, he's the knower and he's the guy, the famous guy, and he has all these advantages. And he debate these dopes, and they, they're trying because they know something's going on, but, they're just college kids, and, he's battering them into submission with his, again, I've seen some of it, and really horrific things he's saying, backing, the genocide of the Palestinian people. And then all the money that we give to Israel to do bad shit, right? And so he's getting paid, and they're buying him buildings, and that's a total conflict of interest because he's receiving money from a foreign government to push their agenda, which is something that Israel does with politicians and celebrities alike. And how many movies are there about the Holocaust every year? I mean, every year there's a fucking couple of Holocaust movies. Is there a real calling from fans to watch yet another Holocaust movie, right? I mean, there's Schindler's List, and then every year there's some fucking movie that involves Nazis. I mean, how many times have Nazis been in a movie? Like, who thinks about Nazis anymore? There's been, there was the Russians, and then there was you can always tell who the big enemy. They always have the enemies in American movies. The enemy that the hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger, or one of these, whatever they are, Jason Statham or someone's fighting, Sylvester Stallone and them. So, there was Vietnam movies. So they wanted to go back and win Vietnam because we got our ass kicked there. So there's all these, movies, Rambo and those movies, so going back to Vietnam. And there's a whole bunch of Vietnam movies. My brother wrote a book on Vietnam. His experiences of, guarding the poppy fields in Vietnam for the CIA and things like this. And then there was the, Germans had historically been The Native Americans used to be, cowboys and Indians. Like they were seen as the bad guys. The Indians were the bad guys, even though Americans were taking their land, right, beating the shit out of them, putting them reservations. But somehow the Indians were the bad guys, right? The white guys were the good guys. These movies, cowboys and Indians, and then there was the Germans, and then became the Russians because of the Cold War under Reagan, and then became the Libyans and the Arab terrorist people, right? And then it was domestic terrorists, right-wing people. They had these different groups when you see a spy movie or something. And you can see, which group is being demonized, what people are being demonized. And when it comes to domestic terrorists, it's always, then it becomes about the American citizens, right? Like everyone's a potential domestic terrorist. And so, all those things, the Arabs in 9/11, it's never Israel. Israel's always Americans' ally. Mossad's always their ally. In fact, there's a lot of these buddy movies with like Mossad agents and spies and these things, right? They're always portrayed as the good guy because Hollywood has, strong influence and ties to Israeli, Israeli Jewish people and Israeli people who support Israel. And there's a guy who was spying on Americans who produced the movie Fight Club, and it came out that he was an Israeli spy and he had to leave the country. And there's all these people with dual citizenship, right? And so they all have a conflict of interest. They're supposed to be pro-American, and yet they're also representing Israel at the same time. And so let's go back to Charlie Kirk here.
Megan, I think I have a bulletproof resume showing my defense of Israel, both on campus, on social media, to great, let's just say mockery and scorn at times, because I believe it, right? I believe in the scriptural land rights given to Israel. I believe in fulfillment of prophecy. And again, I'm not a theologian, but I'm a Christian. My life was changed in Israel. The spiritual energy is so amazing there. I want them to win.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case at all. The third master of the Sizemore system, the guy I knew, Master Chargy, he went to the Wailing Wall. A bunch of people wanted him to go to Israel and go to the Wailing Wall. And he said, there's no spiritual energy here. Spiritual energy and spiritual condition are a big part of the Sizemore system. These ashrams were like heavens on earth. The fourth master of the system has perverted the system, so that sucks. But, these ashrams had this spiritual charge to them. And these gatherings, you'd walk in there, and it's hard to describe. Like the condition, the spiritual condition. But I've been aware of this because I've been meditated under the system for over 32 years. And so I'm aware of spiritual energy and spiritual conditions. And so, if I'm aware of it and I have become more and more sensitive to it, and there's people who have this, you can go to places and sense it. And he went to the Wailing Wall, and, that's where they're humping the wall over there, right? They did the Britney Spears humping the pole. They're like humping the wall, humping the wall, humping the wall, right? They call it shuckling. See, they're humping the wall, humping the wall, humping the wall. There's a whole pelvic thrust that goes into the Wailing Wall, right? This wall, all these guys go in there, Trump puts a yarmulke on, they all do this thing, right? They all celebrate, they all go and do this, all these presidents, all these politicians, American politicians, and they're all, thrusting their pelvises into the wall, right? It's men doing this, right? This is a male behavior. And, so it's not sacred, bro. Like, whenever you're humping the wall, that's not spiritual. Like, whatever you...
But I'm a Christian. My life was changed in Israel. The spiritual energy is so amazing there. I want them to win. I've said that repeatedly.
Win by genocide? You've said that repeatedly, bro?
And however, Megan, you're hitting on something very potent and important. Now, let me first say, I don't want to judge an entire group because there's been many people in the pro-Israel world that have been very sweet, very kind, very nuanced, very Charlie, you're with us. You don't have to agree all the time. However, and I will say this, the behavior by a lot, both privately and publicly, are pushing people like you and me away. Not like we're going to be pro-Hamas, not like we're going to, but we're
never that. No, not that. Like, no one's going to be pro-Hamas. Who the fuck wants to be pro-Hamas? It's really stupid, right?
Honestly, The way you are treating me is so repulsive. I have text messages, Megan, calling me an anti-Semite. I am learning biblical
ridiculous.
Hebrew and writing a book on the Shabbat. I honor the Shabbat, literally the Jewish Sabbath. I visit Israel and fight for it. And there's another article out in the Times of Israel today. I could read it on air. I was just reading before I got on. Charlie, what are you doing? Like, why are you? What am I doing? I'm sorry. Like, let's just take a.
Okay, so first of all, they get to pull their money, and they get to criticize them because fucking, they gave them money. They gave you money because they own you, right? Like, they're not giving you money just, you think they just give the money away for free? So you are saying things that they want you to say. You are a paid, it's like somebody, if you went to an American business and you're a paid spokesperson, they own your fucking opinion of them, right? They're buying your goodwill and your opinion. And if you, let's say you got money from Tide and then you started criticizing Tide, they pull your money. And so they weren't giving you money because you're a great guy or they're friends, but also like the slightest bit of criticism, they go after you. Like not just pulling the money, but calling you an anti-Semite. Like that's how bad it is. Like that's, and there's something fucking wrong with that, right? Where they can't be criticized, even when they're committing genocide, because they're doing evil shit and they've done a bunch of shit that's bad. And so, we saw what happened to RFK Jr. Remember when he said something about Ashkenazi Jews and some other group, Japanese, I'm not sure it was Asian, some group that the COVID didn't affect them as badly. And he got fucking hammered. Remember, he got hammered when he was going in front of the Congress for those hearings, and they came out and he went with that guy Rabbi Shmuley, and he just completely taint-licked Shmuley and the Israelis and Israel, in a way that was like, it was embarrassing. And so they're paying you to shill for them, and now that you have not doing that, they pulled their funding. And if you were going to go full out, if you were going to end up being very critical of them, when the tide was already turning, it seemed like he had more influence than anybody, and your fans are already halfway there, many of them were pressuring you to go in that direction. That's motive right there. Like that seems like a lot more motive than this kid had, right? Like that seems like pretty well, and they do shit like this. So, they have Mossad does shit like this. And if it came out that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent and he was abusing American girls on behalf of the Mossad, holy fuck, right? If that was about to break and that they had information on Trump about that, and if that was going to come out and, they had to turn the tide, and this is turn the tide, bro. RIP, right? Okay, so I just wanted to point this out. So, when Alex Jones was a big part of the truth community back 10, 15 years ago, he just wouldn't criticize Israel. And that's kind of his downfall. One of his big downfalls in the truth community is that he would avoid criticizing Israel in such a way that everyone kind of knew he was getting paid by them and they had influence over him. Like it was really bad. And there's always been this group within the truth community, a lot of right-wing people, like I said, who've blamed Israel. And they always, they'd show up on my channel. Like I said, I didn't like talking about Israel for a variety of reasons. And one was that these group of people were always, it's not the kind of people you want on your channel on a regular basis. Because they were one-trick ponies, just like the flat earthers. And they were just always, all about this. Now, there was the other ones that were evangelical Christians who were really believing in the Old Testament, and they were like Charlie Kirk. And so there's been these two groups, both one ultra supportive of Israel and one blaming Israel for everything. And so, these big events that transpired, there's Israeli fingerprints on a lot of them. And there's at least legitimate suspicion about some of these things. But that group has grown larger since the war with the Palestine, the genocide of the Palestinian people. And now you have these people, these right-wing shills, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, some of these other people that are all, talking about this relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Mossad, and then some of these other things. And so Charlie Kirk's crisis of conscience wasn't about his personal journey where he need to say the rosary. He had his fan base that was, they couldn't believe he was saying some of the things he was saying. He just went in too hard for Israel because he's being paid by them. They're buying him buildings and shit, right? And so, he's going all in for Israel, but he is on the verge of losing fans and losing his legitimacy and losing respect amongst his peers. And so, he's being pulled in that direction. And he could see, anybody could see that a lot of this shit's bullshit. And, even Megyn Kelly, they're all starting to question some of these things. And then they start getting pushback. And it's like, well, I can't believe you're coming at me like that, right? And so, financial pushback is one of the ways that they get you. So all these things are, they're bad for him. And, it's a conflict. And at some point, he was going to have to ditch Israel. He just was. It's clear that that's where he was going. This is how relationships end, right? Where one person says something that somebody doesn't like, the other person overreacts, and then they're like, fuck you. They go after you in a way that you're like, well, that's over the top. I said something mild here that's legitimate. I'm criticizing something that's completely legitimate to criticize, and you're going to come at me like that, right? And so you see relationships end like that all the time. And this has been a pattern in the truth community for a very long time. And like I said, some of these people are just obsessed with blaming Israel and the so-called Jews, in air quotes, for everything. And it's just not cool, and they just suck. I mean, it's just, they're horrible people to be around, but they, right now they're emboldened by what's going on in the world, and now you have all these liberals, and Charlie Kirk's going to these campuses and taking an indefensible position. And then all of a sudden, Trump is on the ropes with Jeffrey Epstein. And so this, there's a solution on the table where you take out Charlie Kirk, they change the Epstein story. You get the stuff where these people who used to be talking about Epstein and Mossad and Trump are now talking about Charlie Kirk. Everyone's talking about Charlie Kirk, and Trump can go on the offensive. And now Israel and Trump, and I guess Charlie Kirk's wife, are all sitting in better positions. They're all been, promoted in some way, or she's been promoted, and they've been, rescued from what would have been a disaster for them. And so, that's like 100% motive, right? I mean, that's legitimate motive right there. Okay, so one of my viewers sent me a short clip of this on Instagram. I was, one of my small accomplishments is bringing back the word ghoul. And after I started using it, Tucker Carlson started to use it, and some of my viewers speculated he watched my show, which I don't think is the case. Although he did respond to some 9/11, some bullshit things he said about that years ago, and I had posted a clip of it, so who knows? Maybe somebody who is, one of his writers or people around him watched my show. Maybe not, who cares? But that's not what this is about. The person who sent me the clip, I'm just doing all this stuff now. And this, here, let's watch this here.
Shocked and sickened by the reaction of the ghoulish and really repulsive reaction of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to Charlie's death. Basically made it all about him and all about his country. Immediately trying to take the energy, the sadness, the grief that people felt over Charlie's murder and redirect it towards support for whatever project he's involved in.
So he kind of hinted at this when he was on the show with J.D. Vance, Charlie's show.
By the way, Benjamin Netanyahu is not the same as the nation of Israel at all. Bibi is despised by many people in Israel, and if you know people who live there, you know that that's true. There are huge divisions within the Israeli government. I mean, there are certain parts of the intel world in Israel that do not support some things that Benjamin Netanyahu has done recently. So it's not the same as attacking Israel, attacking Bibi, but I don't think I've ever seen anything lower than his attempt to hijack Charlie's memory and use it for his own political ends, particularly because what he said was completely untrue. Charlie didn't hate Jews. He loved Jews. He had tons of friends who were Jews. He loved the state of Israel. He loved going there. He did not like Bibi Netanyahu, and he said that to me many times, and he said it to people around him many times. He felt that Bibi Netanyahu was a very destructive force. He was appalled by what was happening in Gaza. He was, above all, resentful that he believed Netanyahu was using the United States to prosecute his wars for the benefit of his country, and that it was shameful and embarrassing and bad for the United States, and he resented it. Didn't hate Netanyahu. He wasn't out there with a placard saying that, but he certainly expressed that to me and a lot of other people. And there's no question that...
Okay, so Candace Owens and him, I don't know if they've talked about this in their tag teaming. I don't know what else he said here about this, but, you know, you get the idea. So there's this part of it, right? The other thing I want to show you here. So according to The Guardian, somebody sent me this. New investigation estimates over 680,000 killed in Gaza in the same week that the IOF Army commander confirms 200,000 plus casualties. And so, you know, I'm not going to fact check this because there's numbers all over the place. But remember in Iraq, America was underestimating the death of Iraqis. Then it came out it was well over 1 million, right? And there's 2 million people in the Gaza. You know, they're in Palestinians in Gaza, right? And so, I mean, that kind of makes sense with all they're doing there. And they're not dying just from bombs and, you know, military exercises, but starvation. And, you know, a lot of kids are dying. I bet the kid deaths are off the charts because, you know, kids starve. It's, you know, it's what happens. And it's basically like they've got nothing there in terms of food and water. We all seen that. And, you know, it's just, I mean, the stress level and just all that stuff. Like, people want to die. Like, they're living under such horrific circumstances, you know. So, I mean, it's bad. Like, you know, Israel's, I don't know how much longer, I don't know what they have up their sleeve in terms of, you know, Netanyahu and the rest of them. But, like, America's turning. Now, I know they own Trump, but, you know, I mean, Trump is going to, all the Republicans that are along with Trump just because of his popularity, like, Trump is going to tank at some point, you know. And he's over there in England when this whole thing's happening with, it just seems like a fucked up thing to do. And posted him a picture of him and Charlie Kirk with the Israeli flag. You know, shit is turning on Trump. Like, this is the kind of thing that can turn it on him. So there's that. Okay, so I just wanted to point this out. So, you know, when Alex Jones was a big part of the truth community, back some, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, he just wouldn't criticize Israel. And that's kind of his downfall. I mean, one of his big downfalls in the truth community is that he would avoid criticizing Israel in such a way that everyone kind of knew he was getting paid by them and they had influence over him. Like, it was really bad. And there's always been this group within the truth community, a lot of right-wing people, like I said, who've blamed Israel. And they always, like, they'd show up on my channel. You know, like I said, I didn't like talking about Israel for a variety of reasons. And one was that these group of people were always, you know, it's not the kind of people you want on your channel on a regular basis. Because they were one-trick ponies, just like the flat earthers. And they were just always, you know, all about this. Now, there was the other ones that were evangelical Christians who were really believing in the Old Testament, and they were like Charlie Kirk. And so there's been these two groups, both one ultra supportive of Israel and one blaming Israel for everything. And so, you know, these big events that transpired, there's Israeli fingerprints on a lot of them. And there's at least legitimate suspicion about some of these things. But that group has grown larger since the war with the genocide of the Palestinian people. And now you have these people, these right-wing shills, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, some of these other people that are all, talking about this relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Mossad, and then some of these other things. And so Charlie Kirk's crisis of conscience wasn't about his personal journey where he need to say the rosary. He had his fan base that was, they couldn't believe he was saying some of the things he was saying. He just went in too hard for Israel because he's being paid by them. They're buying him buildings and shit, right? And so, he's going all in for Israel, but he is on the verge of losing fans and losing his legitimacy and losing respect amongst his peers. And so, he's being pulled in that direction. And he could see, anybody could see that a lot of this shit's bullshit. And, even Megyn Kelly, they're all starting to question some of these things. And then they start getting pushback. And it's like, well, I can't believe you're coming at me like that, right? And so, financial pushback is one of the ways that they get you. So all these things are, they're bad for him. And, it's a conflict. And at some point, he was going to have to ditch Israel. He just was. It's clear that that's where he was going. This is how relationships end, right? Where one person says something that somebody doesn't like, the other person overreacts, and then they're like, fuck you. They go after you in a way that you're like, well, that's over the top. I said something mild here that's legitimate. I'm criticizing something that's completely legitimate to criticize, and you're going to come at me like that, right? And so you see relationships end like that all the time. And this has been a pattern in the truth community for a very long time. And like I said, some of these people are just obsessed with blaming Israel and the so-called Jews, in air quotes, for everything. And it's just not cool, and they just suck. I mean, it's just, they're horrible people to be around, but they, right now they're emboldened by what's going on in the world, and now you have all these liberals, and Charlie Kirk's going to these campuses and taking an indefensible position. And then all of a sudden, Trump is on the ropes with Jeffrey Epstein. And so this, there's a solution on the table where you take out Charlie Kirk, they change the Epstein story. You get the stuff where these people who used to be talking about Epstein and Mossad and Trump are now talking about Charlie Kirk. Everyone's talking about Charlie Kirk, and Trump can go on the offensive. And now Israel and Trump, and I guess Charlie Kirk's wife, are all sitting in better positions. They're all been, promoted in some way, or she's been promoted, and they've been, rescued from what would have been a disaster for them. And so, that's like 100% motive, right? I mean, that's legitimate motive right there. Okay, so this just came in. So all the stuff that I shared today, the stuff with Trump and today's Thursday, September 18th. So I started this video last night. And so the early stuff in this video, the voiceover this morning, the stuff about Charlie Kirk and his wife getting together, and the stuff about Trump in the ear were all from today. And then the other stuff was from yesterday. And there's more stuff that came in yesterday. Of course, I want to get into the Jimmy Kimmel thing because that's, big. That's huge. Part of this thing. And then there's a horrific interview with Charlie Waters and whatever his name is, Waters and Jesse Waters and J.D. Vance. But my wife just sent me this whilst I was doing this. And there's a piece I want to get to where both Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson are talking about how that Charlie Kirk and her were threatened by Israel. And so, but this is what a piece of shit Tucker Carlson is. So he sent, I guess, a text message. I don't know how my wife must have ended up on some kind of list here. But it's Tucker. Hi, it's Tucker. I don't write messages like this often, but after losing Charlie, I can't stay quiet. I loved Charlie. I loved him. I loved Charlie Kirk. He was more than a leader. He was a friend. He was my friend. Losing him has been devastating. But if you knew Charlie, you would know exactly what he would say to us right now. Don't you dare quit. Who's going to quit over this? Nobody quits. You think people are just going to fold up their tents and quit over this? They don't quit. People go on with their lives. It's stupid. Don't you dare quit. Now it's our duty to keep that mission alive. Will you give today in Charlie's honor to grow the movement he gave everything to make? Make your gift now. And so they want you to donate to Charlie Kirk Turning Point, which I guess for Tucker Carlson is, you know, I mean, they're already fishing for fucking donations. I mean, has it been less than a week, right? Like, holy shit. Of course they are, because and here it is. Charlie gave everything, now we carry the mission. Charlie Kirk poured his life. This is the official. I'll show this on a video clip here. Now, this is where, you know, Charlie gave everything, now we carry the mission. Charlie Kirk poured his life into building a movement rooted in faith, freedom, and love of country. He believed in America's dependent on raising up generation who would never surrender. That vision is alive and stronger than ever. Prayers are rising, support is pouring in, millions of students are rallying, volunteers are flooding in, and vigils in churches and across the nation. The fire Charlie lit, it's burning brighter than ever, but now the responsibility is ours. We will honor his legacy by pressing forward, not slowing down, not surrendering. This is time to preserve what was built. This is time to fight harder, grow faster, unleash the true power of the grassroots machine Charlie created. We will make it proud. We will defend America's future, and we'll stop until freedom prevails. Please use this form below to make a generous gift in Charlie's honor. You know, you can give $100,000 here if you're really feeling generous. There's 5,000, 10,000, 25, 50, and 100, and they got all kinds of shit you can use here. And then they want your info too. You know, very fucking greasy. So I don't know if somebody sent me this. I don't know how I got this. I think somebody sent to me on Instagram. This was July 11, 2025. Arkansas taxpayers loan Israel millions as the war in Gaza grinds on. It's no secret the United States, Israel's biggest budget supporter, even as the country faces credible accusations of war crimes from nearly every international governance and human rights organizations in the world. The U.S. sends billions of dollars in military aid to Israel every year, making it the largest recipient of American foreign aid in history. Many Arkansasians may not know that the state government is sending money to Israel, albeit as loans rather than aid. As of July, Arkansas holds $55 million in Israeli bonds. You know, I showed you that with Florida. So, including $20 million purchased since May 1st. So they're loaning them. You know, Arkansas's got all kinds of probably problems with people's health care. You know, all kinds of, you know, problems with their own citizenry. And they're loaning tens of millions of dollars, $100 million bonds within the next few years. They want to do another 100. Two boards overseeing the pension funds for Arkansas state employees also recently voted to buy up to $100 million more in Israeli bonds. You know, like, are you shitting me, right? Now, that's how much hold that Israel has on state governments of Florida and Arkansas, where they're buying these unsecured bonds because Israel's economy is tanked. And they may not recoup this money. And then all the money our governments have spent on them. So just think about that for a little bit. And then they have all this money to buy politicians and people like Charlie Kirk. So in the midst of this, all this stuff I was doing yesterday, this video pops up.
Of all the people that we know in our business, you know, the kind of let me give you my opinion business, I think it's fair to say he was the kindest. I mean, for real, and in private too. Even people he was really mad at, he would always say, "Well, I understand where that person's coming from." It's like, wow, his decency was a challenge to me.
But he had enough friends. He was pretty kind, but he didn't. He limited the amount of friends he has.
Supposed to be that. Why was that so offensive to people?
Because it was power. It's so much more powerful, frankly, than negativity.
Yeah, that's not why it was offensive. It was the shit that he said that the left took offense to. The left gets hyper offensive. But, it was the bullshit stuff he said because he was a shill for Israel, which all these guys were at some point. Tucker Carlson broke free, fairly longer before Megyn Kelly did. But you guys were all shills for Israel. And you were all shills for the story. And these guys were on Fox News and putting all that shit out for Fox News, which...
In anger.
Yeah.
It's infectious. It's a contagion.
Okay, so let's move forward here.
Thought Charlie was, quote, too hateful. And this is a guy who's into furries and he's into...
Wait, let's go back here.
And let's say, okay, this was it was motivated exactly as the authorities say. And he thought Charlie was, quote, too hateful. And this is a guy who's into furries and he's into trannies and he's living with one and, all the things. Why would Charlie have been targeted by this guy for that? Why would it be Charlie? You say all the same things. I say all the same things. Most of the people in our space and in conservative or independent media say those things. Why? Why Charlie? And sadly, I think it's this factor. It's this magnetism from him.
Okay, so she's backing the official story. She kind of said, if this official story is true, whatever she said. So she at least said that. But, these are people who still won't call bullshit on Trump. See, this is the problem. It was so obvious that Trump faked the assassination attempt. And we would have President Kamala Harris, which would be a different set of problems. Not worse, not better, but different. And, it would be pretty fucked up. But if it came out, or if these people called Trump on his bullshit, or even now, because now's the time to call Trump on his bullshit, because of all the shit he's doing. Because, the shit with Jimmy Kimmel isn't cool. And Jimmy Kimmel is one of the people I dislike more. Anybody who's watched my videos for a while, I used to hammer that motherfucker and I'll talk about that when we get to it, right? But it's just wrong. You can't do shit like that. Like censorship, I've suffered from censorship here on YouTube and still am. I'm shadow banned. You can't find my videos. My videos have been taking off here a little bit more. I should get millions of views. So, like YouTube has constricted my channel, doesn't bring in new members and new viewers. And then all of a sudden, a lot of new viewers have come to my channel. I got a funny comment I want to read at some point. Maybe not even today because of how long this video is going to go. But, there are new viewers coming in now all of a sudden, which is great and is something that I need. The channel needs. But I noticed that my video from yesterday, like all my other videos now have 7,000, 8,000 views. Again, I used to get 10, 20,000, 15,000 on a regular basis. And then, there was a time where I got millions. Of course, I was covering different things then. But, YouTube had opened up my channel again for this Charlie Kirk thing. But my last video is stuck on like 3,000 views again. The last Charlie Kirk thing. So I don't know if people are more or less tired of this subject. But it's more likely that YouTube isn't sending out notifications. And so I've suffered from censorship in a variety of ways. One, decrease in subscription, decrease in the amount of money that I make. This is my job, and I'm making way less money than I used to make. And also, less contact with new viewers, which is what kills you. You have to bring in new viewers. But also, there was things I couldn't say. There's things about COVID I couldn't talk about. Because the Biden administration pressured these social media giants and threatened them. These social media giants have this title something or other. There's this major lawsuit that took place, I think, in Louisiana and Mississippi. It was a joint state lawsuit against Biden from these people who are talking about censorship involved RFK Jr. And Joe Biden lost, and he lost substantially, but the Supreme Court upheld the decision to after the election. And what Joe Biden did was, and not Joe Biden, his people did, is they threatened, and Mark Zuckerberg went on Tucker Carlson and talked about this. And what he did was he threatened to pull this title something or other that they have, which allows them to have a social media channel and to not get sued for whatever individual people put up on their channel. And if they didn't have that exemption, then they would have to have a team of lawyers going through every post before it was made public, and it would destroy their whatever it is. And the Biden administration threatened to pull that if they didn't censor people the way they wanted. And now the Trump administration is doing the same kind of thing in a different way, but it's all wrong. Trump campaigned on getting rid of censorship, right? And so, now they're going all in for no reason. So we all suffered from that, right? We all suffered from them doing that then and doing it now. But these guys didn't call Trump out on his bullshit assassination attempt, and they're not calling him out on it now. But this story with this kid makes no sense at all. And so, We'll go a little watch a little more.
Positivity, this aura, like that, this angel-like aura around him that was so incredibly threatening, way more threatening than the rest of us, because it was powerful and it was winning people over. It was converting people at a rapid.
Jesus Christ. Okay. But then she's going to get into, because she's saying that, right? But then the title of this video, Megyn Kelly, Charlie and I were threatened after refusing to cut ties with Israel, with Tucker Carlson. So this is, her being threatened by Israel because Tucker Carlson. So let's go to that part. So here she talks about, Tucker Carlson was told by his handlers from Israel to cut ties with Tucker Carlson and not invite him and other people to one of his big events, right? So that's been documented by him and Candace Owens, and this is well known. This has been talked about quite a bit. And she talks about here.
Tucker, you have a lot of it too. And it is the reason why Charlie is not the only one who's been threatened or was threatened to cut ties with you or not platform you. I too have gotten that, especially since you've been more outspoken on Israel. And I couldn't care less the amount of pressure they put on me. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. This is madness. Why would you want to silence such a powerful, important voice just because you disagree with them on one subject, one on which we've all watched you sincerely evolve as you grapple with principles you've been espousing for years?
Okay, so, why would you say that bullshit about this kid? If you take the two motives, because police have to look at motives, right? People are solving crimes, have to look at, we all have to look at motives. Motives are important. Everyone wants to know what this kid's motive is. And we still don't know, and now we've moved on to Jimmy Kimmel. This kid has more or less disappeared. The gay kid who was living with the transgender has disappeared, and he might come back again in different capacity, but he doesn't have a manifesto because he joked about not having one. And they have these text messages, very easily to fake evidence against him, right? And very easily to create this narrative. But they never give these guys a voice. The guy doesn't do some interview with Tucker Carlson for 3 hours and say why he did it and what he, going through it, because his story would fall apart. And, especially somebody who might have doubts about the official story. Where, if you're going to assassinate somebody, if somebody gets assassinated, a government with a, Mossad or CIA working jointly together with Trump and Netanyahu, who have both benefited from this extraordinarily. Netanyahu ran out this tour that Tucker Carlson was talking about, how gross it was, how ghoulish it was, for him to make it about himself and his agenda and make Charlie's life about him and Israel, right? And so, Israel and Trump and Netanyahu and his wife, Charlie's wife, are the ones that seem to be benefiting the most. She's going to get a starring role as wife, especially since the weird-ass eulogy she gave. But this kid isn't benefiting, right? And his family and everyone around him, they're not benefiting. And, all of the state of Utah is not benefiting. And all the liberal people in the transgender community are not benefiting because they're going to talk about this here. They want to go, they talk about J.D. Vance is going to be asked about the murderous transgenders that are, the gang of transgenders that are out there murdering people. Jesse Waters is going to pitch that narrative. You think the gay community is psyched about what's going on? The transgender community is psyched about this thing, right? They're not winning. Jimmy Kimmel ain't fucking winning, right? The liberals are getting their asses handed to them over this thing. And Trump is going to grab more. And Trump always wants to grab more power, so he's winning. I just watched the Charlie Sheen fucking Netflix thing. Boy, is that guy turned into a fucking horror creature, like a ghoulish horror creature. I mean, he's in a better place. He's sober, but the guy's, if you've seen it, you've seen it. But, these are the people who are winning. Netanyahu, Israel, and Turning Point. And the rest of these people aren't. And so why would you even bring up that kid as a real story?
Like America First. Like what's happening to Christians. Like what's best for us and our kids here. How do I keep them safe? That's my number one priority. And I've been just absolutely disgusted and recoiled from people who have tried to pressure me on it. It, of course, never happened. But I know from speaking to Charlie, he felt it too. You've heard it from Charlie.
It totally would happen. You've been pressured forever. You were pressured to start talking about Israel. Like you guys started to cave to your audience. You pander to your audience.
That he felt, and there is a layer here of nefarious pressure to have certain narratives go only one way.
Yes.
That must be called out and must be fought.
And those narratives, which Charlie was about to, expose, and now he's dead. And you're talking about this kid, that this kid saw Charlie's angelic aura and decided to target him rather than you all depraved people who weren't as angelic as Charlie was because he claimed to be religious, right? And so, this is how fucked it is. And it all, this comes back to the Trump thing. If you're going to call out these narratives, call out Trump, because Trump is completely compromised on Epstein, which means he's completely owned by Israel, because that means Epstein had shit on him. That this is why Trump is the best friend that Israel has ever had in the White House, according to Netanyahu, and why Trump is giving them a complete green light, and why they're just fucking going for it, despite everyone all these other countries in the world saying, you guys are, fuck you, Israel, right? All the other countries, but America's backing them because of Trump, and even Trump's supporters who are bailing on him. And so who has the motive here? The number one motive, and the number one, was Trump, with Trump, the people who are, who are benefiting from this, Israel and Trump, in some joint operation. That makes the most sense. I don't have proof, sure, and I don't do proof, because I know you never get it, right? And even if you get it, no one will acknowledge it, the powers that be. But, if you look at who's benefiting and who had the ability to do this, it would be American CIA and Mossad. Those would be the two, the most likely targets, the most likely, the most logical suspects. Okay, so I went to eat lunch. I was going to end it there. I was going to move on to the next thing, but it's just too important. The information that they're saying here that is related to, my point of view on this thing. So, when I ate breakfast this morning, I think it was MSNBC, either that or CNN, was covering Trump's trip to see the royal family. And it was all about Prince William and Kate. They picked up Trump at the airport, and they spent all this time with the couple. And Trump had to give a scripted endorsement, which he read. The firm that runs the royal family was I'm a little bit out of breath here because I just came in from a walk with my dogs. Beautiful day outside. And Trump had to give this scripted endorsement of Kate and William, right? And so it's all performative, all of this kind of, this political theater stuff and all of it, right? And the royal family's masters of that kind of bullshit, right? Tugging on their patriotic heartstrings of the dopey patriots that buy into the bullshit narratives about the country and religion and all these things that are all there to suppress them, right? You hold the hand that holds you down. From the Pearl Jam song about sexual abuse, she holds the hand that holds her down, right? That's, where the right-wing people who follow this, who have been indoctrinated into this patriotic bullshit, they get abused by these people, who are, hurting them all the time, and they don't even know it, especially Trump now. So, I listened to the rest of this while I was walking and making lunch, and I was like, it's worth covering here. So to start off with, I should make this clear here. There is a narrative out there, which many of you guys know about, most of you, probably all of you, perhaps, that they are moving towards, martial law. I've had a folder on martial law since before the Boston bomber. And I, knew martial law is a stage. When things are getting real, martial law will be applied. So, when they're about to collapse the economy and real things are going to happen, they want troops on the streets, especially in the city. So when this thing was happening with Trump, that means it's getting close. And Trump is doing all kinds of things and saying all kinds of things. I also was watching this interview with Dana Bash and some Republican Florida congressman who was saying, there's all these threats from liberal people, and Jimmy Kimmel is inciting, he's defending Trump's suppression of Jimmy Kimmel, and what Jimmy Kimmel said is next to nothing. And they wouldn't even, you can't even find it, which is, I'll get into that in a moment, right? But this thing about moving to, 15-minute cities, Agenda 31, martial law, these narratives that have been around, the New World Order, all these things, that you accepting a New Deal. Trump is really pushing for this quicker than we've ever seen. I mean, we've moved closer to that in the past 6 months since Trump's second term than the entire time that I've been covering all this stuff. Years of covering this stuff, where they've been like moving very slowly. They gain something, they lose something. They're trying to move people to accept something that they don't want to accept, right? They're grooming you for something. And so with this kind of agenda, the other piece to this is, well, let's go here. I'll talk about it as we go through.
Well, I should have said in my open that when Charlie was denounced as anti-Semitic and, quote, dangerous by the American Jewish Committee, you were too. That was a press release. I don't know if you've ever even seen it. And I just remember when I read that at the time thinking, okay, these are like two of the most pro-Israel, basically pro-Israel people like on the internet. I don't understand. So
this is something you should know about Israel. They want you 100%, even if you're going against your own self-interest. This is how Israel treats America. That even if you're going against your own interests, like this is a kind of narcissistic friend Israel is, right? Like even if you're going against your own self-interests as a person. Now, it's bad for Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk with all of the youth, as they've both said, or she said here, that Charlie had said. I guess she's going to say that here. Let's listen to that. Well, let me just finish this one point. She's going to say this thing, how Charlie's saying to them, the youth is against you. They've lost the American youth. And lots of people in the right wing are like, fuck you, Israel, right? There's an attitude of fuck you, Israel going on right here. This attitude that these people, this specific group of people, historically piss everybody off, and then they get, they turn against this group of people historically from country to country over the past, thousands of years. Like this is something that's been documented. And, when you call yourself the chosen ones, then you think that everything revolves around you. If you think you're God's chosen people, which Charlie Kirk believed because it's in the Bible, and the Bible sucks. It's a piece of shit, especially the Old Testament, compared to real spiritual books, real spiritual literature. It's a manipulative book. And somebody wrote me a comment saying, nice comment saying, I haven't listened to you in a while. Big fan of yours. I don't agree with you on this. God, the God of Christianity. There's no God of Christianity. There's no God of Saj Marg that I do. God isn't to be defined by your religion. God is, your religion exists to serve God. It should. Your spiritual organization exists to serve God. And so, God is something that we aspire to understand and to experience on deeper levels. Like we'll never know God fully. We can experience God's love. We can interact. We can intercommune with God. We can pull God into our decision-making, where we can ask God to help us with our decision-making in our lives, and we can walk hand in hand on our spiritual path with God, on a metaphorical, basis. But no religion owns God. No, there's no point of view on God that's the true message of God, right? We aspire to serve God, right? And so there's no chosen people. That's silly. Everybody's chosen because God is in everything and everybody. So when you think of yourself as that, and that's the way the evangelical Christians also think, then you think everyone else is there to serve you, just like God. Trump thinks he's chosen one. Anybody who thinks they're the chosen one, LeBron James has chosen one on his back. They think everyone around him is there to serve them. Every king, every person, all these people of noble blood, all this bullshit stuff. They think they're there to serve them. In Israel, this is the kind of friend they are. There's nobody who's taint-licked more than Charlie Kirk to Israel. Like he's been Israel's number one supporter. And he went into these hostile arenas with college kids who are, just hating Israel. And he debated them. And he, tried to persuade them, or at least the people around them, that Israel is something, other than what it really is. And he did all that work, carried all that water for them. And Megyn Kelly, I guess, did the same thing. And then they hint that they might say a few negative things about Israel, and they're called anti-Semitic, and they're attacked, and they pulled their funding. That's the kind of fucking country we're dealing with. I mean, America is pretty narcissistic, and we do some narcissistic shit. But this is, and they're using American taxpayer dollars and Arkansas's dollars and Florida's dollars to do it, right? To fuck these people over who have been nothing but good soldiers for them. And so those kind of people don't value you. They think of you as goy, as like less than like livestock, right? That you're just there, to serve them. And so they don't think about murdering one of you like Charlie Kirk. If it serves Israel, right, you're there to serve Israel. And so that's another thing, and that's not in their favor for this, this idea of being a suspect.
Maybe we should have this offline, but let's just have it now. I don't get that. Why would you attack? There are definitely people who hate Israel who are not anti-Semites. There are people who hate Israel who are anti-Semites. There's a whole range. And then there are like people who have religious reasons for wanting to blow up Israel. Those are all threats. Why would they be attacking you and Charlie? And honestly, I feel like me. I mean, what is that? Why attack people who are pretty reasonable, who don't want to get into a fight on the topic, who just want to have their country thrive? Why denounce them as
because America thriving only works when it's here to thrive to serve Israel. America is being used by Israel for years, and as soon as America turns on Israel or just withholds some of the funding, just if there was some. I mean, look at Kamala Harris, barely said anything about Israel, and they went after it. They want 100%. They expect every politician to sign a pledge saying that you will serve Israel above your own country, or we'll take your seat with American taxpayer dollars that you guys are funding us to do it. We'll spend your money on your government money, maybe even your state money, on destroying you politically if you don't fucking bow to us, right? So, this is the kind of friend they are, right? This is a really good friend.
Anti-Semites. What is that?
And let me just underscore for your audience what I had said. I mean, the sum total of what I had said when they started coming for me, just to show the absurdity of this. I had said on Piers Morgan that Israel was losing the PR war, that they had lost the Democrats and the independents and were starting to lose the Republican Party in America, and it was time to wrap it up.
There's lots of Republicans and truthers that already dislike Israel. I talked about the evangelicals who believe in the biblical support of Israel, but there's lots of Republicans in the truth community that think Israel is responsible for everything, right? The Zionists.
A quote from Donald Trump, who had said it a year earlier when he was still a candidate. Time to wrap it up. That's what I said about Israel. And then at Turning Point at the Student Action Summit with Charlie, we talked all about Epstein in my appearance there. It was all about Pam Bondi, frankly.
Right.
And we talked about whether he might possibly be an asset for someone. And I said he might be. And Israel, would make sense to me. Didn't know, but that's one of the things we should consider and look at. And that will conclude the list of things I said about Israel. That after 2 years of going on the air and defending them every week.
Which is fucked up, right? Because, she said that she doesn't cave to pressure. But that's the politically correct thing. That's the thing that you would do to be, straight with all these Republicans and it's obviously Israel and the money that's coming in and all the networks and that's why you're going to get your show's going to get picked up and you're going to get priorities on YouTube and other social media platforms by backing Israel, right? The people who don't back Israel, you get shadow banned, right? So that would be the smart thing to do, even if you didn't agree with it. And how can you agree with the genocide? Where that guy says it's 600,000 people or 200,000 people dead, if it's 600,000, there's 400,000 kids, 350,000 kids dead there then, right? I mean, God knows how many bodies there are there, and people who's it's not just they're all suffering, like they're living in a horror over there, right? I mean, we know it, and Israel is hell bent on grabbing that land. That's what I said in the beginning. They wanted that land forever. That's why they've been building settlements. The Gaza Strip is going to be part of Israel. In 10 years, it'll just be like, that's just what happened. They're going to get away with it, whatever they pay politically and whatever it is, right? But, that's the kind of people they are. Like Palestinian people were actually very kind to Jewish people compared to other Muslims. Like they got along pretty well there before the partition. There was Jews and Palestinians living pretty much, with a vast amount of land for a small amount of people. There was, they were living in harmony. And then this is how the Israeli people treated them, right? Like taking their houses, their land, kicking them out, and then just kicking them out of the country altogether, doing ethnic cleansing. And then, anybody who says anything else about it, they go after and they try to terminate them. These people, their friends, like Charlie Kirk. Like, what the fuck, right? And so is that the kind of people that would kill Charlie Kirk? Sure. Is that if they have that kind of attitude? I mean, they're killing him by taking his funding away, by going against him, right? Just for, like the slightest bit of, oh, yeah, you're going to say anything about us? And we're obviously, like, the guilty conscience, right? This is what happens when you worship a God that's a demon. The God in the Old Testament is a demon. And when you worship that kind of God, you have a lot of fear and guilt and anxiety and, these types of things. Like it's a very, negative religion because, and this, where Christianity is built on half a God. Like the God of Christianity is the God of Jesus, which is completely different than the God that is presented in the Old Testament. Yet they put those two stupid books together. I mean, the first one being worse than the second one, and they shouldn't be together. Like it was a bad choice. Because the Old Testament has nothing to do with Jesus's teachings. Jesus grew up thinking that, like if I wrote a book about everything that I talk about in terms of God, I was a Catholic. I said the Rosary. I was going to prayer meetings with nuns at my house, right? My mom had these prayer meetings. My mom was really religious, and we had nuns at our house. Like I was friends with nuns when I was, in 8th grade. And then, I got drunk when I was 14. It's like I weighed 100 pounds. I was small. My family grows later in life. Like we grow late. And, I grew up until I was like 21. I was still growing. I'm like 6'1" now. I was 5 feet. I was one of the smallest kids in my class. And I got drunk with these guys, built some skateboards, like a half pipe. And I came home and I was like inebriated and we had this raised ranch. And I came in the front door, and all these prayer meeting people with these nuns were there, and I was like, I had to crawl up the stairs. I was so fucking drunk, like it was, I went in my room and started throwing out beer. I was at a keg party, but I was friends with these people, and I knew them. I grew up in that religion, and now that was the religion I evolved out of, just like Jesus. And I'm not comparing myself, obviously, but this is what spiritual people do. The religion that Jesus evolved out of was Judaism. And so that's why his teachings are completely different than the teachings he grew up with. But they decided to slap these two books together. And they're just, the God of the Old Testament is a demon.
Turned some weird crowd into, she's an anti-Semite. So, I mean, F these people, because it's a lie. It was even more of a lie about Charlie, who had said even less than me. He had said nothing. Like absolutely nothing. And they
Charlie was thinking about, he was inviting these people on. They wouldn't let him. They were telling him who he could pick and who he couldn't, who he could have on his show and who he couldn't. This guy Dave Smith, who's Jewish, and Dave Smith was saying shit as a Jewish person, and they wouldn't let Charlie Kirk have him on, or Tucker Carlson, and he was clearly, starting to hedge on some of these things, and they went after him. And now he's dead, right? And so this is the one group that was threatening him. When we talk about this thing I was talking about in the beginning of this voiceover, this part here, the after lunch thing, when I was talking about this idea of moving people to Agenda 31 housing and all that shit, right? Governments kill the most amount of people. Governments kill more people than individuals. This is the difference about, let's go to this part here.
Terms about him because he was on the other side of me when we had that discussion, and because he hosted you, and because he had the nerve to invite Dave Smith in a debate, because he allowed one side to be represented, and he had the Israel side fully represented too. So this was just such an unfair accusation, and I don't know why these very ardent advocates don't accept friendship when you offer it, when you've
because it's a one-sided friendship.
Proven that you are genuinely a friend. I've said openly, Tucker, I don't want to debate. I'm on their
Why
side.
are you friends with Israel? Why do you go back and still want to be friends and you don't want to debate them? When they're clearly they suck, right? They fucking suck. They're horrible to America and Americans. We get nothing from them. And they're committing a genocide. Why do you want to be fucking friends with them? Even after they've, demonized you and turned on you. Like, why would you want to be friends?
There's no reason to put somebody on the show so they can convince me that Israel's right. I'm on their side. I agree with that. But in response to those...
Why are you on their side? Like, after all that, like, they've turned on you. If you did to them what they did to you, they would be, they would be like, slandering you. Like, they would to go in fully on you the way that they've turned on you. If you turned on them, you barely even said anything, and they turned on you that much. Why would you back a country like that? Why wouldn't you turn completely against them, but going, oh my God, I was fucking wrong with you. I was fucking wrong about you, right? You're fucking murderous. You're hateful. You're myopic. You're totally narcissistic. The same thing with Trump. Why haven't you guys turned on fucking Trump yet? When he's turned against all the things he promised, he's putting out martial law, the way he's handled everything, and from the fucking terrorists to all these things, all of it. He's obviously best buddies with Epstein. Like, what is it going to take for you guys to turn on these motherfuckers, right? Like, you're still shills. She said that I won't be compromised. But if a person did what Israel has done to Charlie Kirk and her, you'd be like, oh my God, you're a horrible fucking person. Like, that's what it takes for you to go after me, right? When you've obviously done some things wrong. Like, if one of your friends had done what Israel is doing in the world, and your fans were shouting at you to fucking say something about it because they know it's so wrong, they've all turned on your friend, and you know that your friend's a piece of shit, and you can come out and say, I love my friend, but yeah, I agree with you that some of these things my friend did was horrible. And if your friend turned on you after all that, right, because you're guilty as fuck, you'd be like, oh my God, I guess we're not friends anymore, right? I guess we're enemies now. I mean, that's how it fucking should be. Like, why are you still pandering to these motherfuckers?
Comments, and then ultimately having Marjorie Taylor Greene on, where we criticized AIPAC. I mean, who defends a lobbyist group? They treated me like I was Mehdi Hassan. Not everybody, but like the loudest Israel defenders. And to turn around and call Charlie Kirk an anti-Semite is such a disgusting smear. And you're right, he's young. He was young and wasn't used to being attacked like that by people who supported him and people whose donations are actually really important to the ongoing existence of his organization.
Yeah, because he's compromised. Like, that's fucked. Like, there's the only thing you say about Charlie Kirk and his wife and that organization, they were, a pro-Israel fucking lobbyist. They're part of the pro-Israel lobby that would go into these schools. They were supposed to go to these schools and, they were supposed to do damage control to all these students who were protesting against Israel. That's what his job was, to go and try to stifle all that shit and to create a counter movement of Christians that would be against those protesters, to create, division in these schools. And Trump was defunding these colleges. I mean, this is how fucking much power Israel has. And you guys they know it more than I do. And they won't fucking say it, right? And so, of course, they'd kill somebody. That's how important America's their fucking, is their cash cow. America is supporting Israel in every possible way. Israel would be nothing without America. America defends Israel and funds them. And if they're going to lose Israel, which they're losing, and if Charlie Kirk turning on them would make them lose these young Christian Republicans, and all of a sudden, everyone in America turns on him, and then Trump has to do something because now he has to turn on him. And if they expose Trump with their Epstein bullshit, if they have, Mossad has shit on Trump and they expose it, Trump will go down, but then everyone will be like, well, why did you guys have fucking Epstein shit? And then it comes out, because everyone knows it, the narrative's there, that Israel was running a spy organization that include pedophilia of young American girls. I mean, we'd be at war with Israel. There'd be like, never mind defunding them. Like, people would demand fucking payback. Like, it'd be like, America and Israel would be at war. Like, it would be a fucking nasty-ass divorce, right? And, not a divorce because Israel can't do shit. And then all the other countries in there hate Israel already. It would cease to exist, right? And so that's that's on the table here. And then, Charlie Kirk, if he was going to turn on him, they couldn't have that. So there's a motive.
And it took a lot for him to say no to them. And it took a lot for him to be honest about the fact that his opinions had evolved. And let's face it, Charlie was like an unofficial spokesperson for the youth of America, in particular, conservative youth. And I don't know if people have checked, but they no longer support Israel. And everybody under 30 is against Israel. Charlie was 31. And so as a friend, he's saying to them, as same way I, as a friend, am saying, I am telling you, you've lost Dems, independents, and you're starting to lose Republicans. You need to wrap it up. You've had a 2-year long leash. I know you want your hostages back, but this cannot
bullshit stuff.
not go on until you have every
So
hostage.
your hostages in air quotes. The fucking Hamas is an Israeli asset. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense.
That's just not going to. You're going to lose every friend you have. And that's what he was saying, because that's what he was hearing from his constituency. And so what he did to them was brave and noble to the donors who were very, very pro-Israel. It was brave and it was noble. He did not deserve to be smeared over it. And look, I like you, have zero belief that this had anything to do with his death, but it's
Why? Fucking why? This is why, I'm like, I'm going to have to play this whole thing now. Why would it have zero to do with his death? Why would it have zero to do with his death? You just laid out complete motive. I mean, this young kid who's like, well, we'll get into this thing here.
part of the larger narrative that you're making, that he was a truth teller, that he was a fearless truth teller, and that there were a lot of pockets when he turned to them and said those truths that grew extremely uncomfortable. And whether it was some too online, disgusting, messed up 22-year-old in Utah.
So why bring it back to that? Jesus Christ. You just laid out. So this 22-year-old, what they want to do is, they've been doing this for a while. The killers are loner, individual, angry people that lots of people thought was a nice guy. So that means that everybody could say, all the people that know you would say, hey, you're a nice guy, right? Or this guy was great. He didn't show any signs. Nonviolent, regular citizen, and that you can be turned into a killer. So that means that every one of us is a suspect and a potential terrorist. They've been trying to do this for, since 9/11. They make every American a potential terrorist. Any one of you guys can be radicalized. You could be the nicest person. This is the whole thing with Luigi Mangione and the rest of it, more recently. But they've been doing this for years. And I've said this as a person who does not believe in the psychological field, even though I'm trained as a counselor. I have a master's degree in counseling, and I worked in treatment centers and outpatient clinics and did counseling work. And I can tell you that the model for counseling, although there's some merit in it, it's negative. For one, it views every person as being crazy. Everybody in the DSM-5 can be diagnosed with something. And that sticks with you now with the internet and the, data. You get diagnosed with something, then people like you go get a job and everyone will know everything about you. Like it's just going to be out there, and they already have all that shit on you. And so then you're, labeled as this crazy person. I mean, all these kids are getting diagnosed and are on medication, and all that shit sticks with them. Like that's, people are like, well, like, you seem okay now, but when you were a kid, you were fucked up. So maybe we don't hire you because, whatever. And so, when they're evaluating people for being called down the road, they have all that information of whether you're fucked up or not. And according to the DSM-5, everyone's fucked up. If you want to get insurance payments as a counselor, you have to diagnose somebody with something. And I would usually say, I forget what it was called, adjustment disorder, that you were having trouble adjusting to something in your life. But you know what isn't in the DSM-5? That if everybody's fucked up and everybody's got some kind of psychological issue, that means our system makes people crazy. And it's the Wi-Fi, and it's the diet, it's the food, and it's the lack of a family, it's the lack of connection to God, and it's all the acting and lying, and now all the internet stuff. And so our society, which is, people are more crazy now than ever. And it's the medicines and the side effects and the depression and, the SSRIs and all these things, right? There's so many things in our society that contribute to you being fucked up. But the society is never blamed. Our society is always great. And what a great place to live in America. What a wonderful country. And so America's never blamed. Why is everyone so fucked up in America? Because America's fucked up, right? And so no one ever tells you that. And so what they want to do is never blame a government that kills everybody. They don't want to blame Mossad or the CIA that are great at assassinating people, that had every reason to do so. Trump had every reason to have this guy killed, especially if they're pushing an agenda, and he's pushing that agenda even harder now. And now he's free from the Jeffrey Epstein story because everything's focused on Charlie Kirk. And Israel, he was turning on Israel, so Israel, didn't need him anymore. In fact, now they could use him in a different way. And so it makes way more sense that Israel, the Mossad and CIA and Trump did a joint mission to do this thing to Charlie Kirk. If he's really dead, whatever, I don't know. Like, again, this is all fucking speculation. But it's more, if you're gonna guess at something, or you're gonna make an educated a guess or assumption, this one single 22-year-old individual acting alone, which now they're saying, maybe not, with a weird transgender boyfriend, like all these things, it's out now that his family, the transgender family, was renting a house to this kid, to the two of them, because they couldn't stand the kid, their own kid, their transgender kid. This is in Utah. This is one kid who had been radicalized in 2 months, or an organization like Mossad in Israel that had every reason to get rid of Charlie Kirk. And and they've just laid it out for you. I didn't lay it out, they did. But they're like, it has nothing to do with his death. Well, you don't know that. There's a motive there. You don't see there's a motive. But of course, they're still owned. And Trump had every reason for him to be killed.
Or, somebody who couldn't stand his messaging that was very frank around race or around Islam, whatever. Take your pick. He said the hard picks.
Because somebody is more likely to murder Charlie Kirk than a government. The governments kill the most people. And corporations, pharmaceutical drugs, corporation, all these things, weapons that are made by the military-industrial complex. The killers of people are corporations, governments first, corporations, doctors, these things, right? Individuals killing other individuals is a small percentage of it. Like infinitesimally small. People killing people. It's always governments and corporations and big organizations, heartless, organizations. And so this whole thing is fucked, right?
Truths on all of these things. I think a lot of people have to have a really ugly conversation with themselves now in the wake of his death about whether they added to the hate surrounding him.
Yeah. Now you're going to bring it back to that? It's fucking Israel. Like, the number one suspect should be Israel. Okay, so here's Jimmy Kimmel thing.
Network are taking Jimmy Kimmel Live off the air indefinitely. This follows a controversy over comments the late-night comedian made Monday night about Charlie Kirk's suspected killer and the MAGA movement and their reaction to the assassination. Let's get straight to CNN's chief media affairs correspondent, Brian Stelter. Brian.
Brian Stelter. So Jimmy Kimmel's, I used to call everybody, I used to do the bit with the S on the end. I don't do it as much anymore, but I still keep Jimmy Kimmel's. So I cover Jimmy Kimmel's quite a bit because Jimmy Kimmel's was a gatekeeper. His show is in the Freemasonic Hall of Hollywood. It used to be a Freemasonic hall, and they still have all this Freemasonic stuff in there. Channing Tatum went backstage and did a dance number when he hosted for Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel went away for 2 months, which I'll get into in a moment. But Channing Tatum went backstage, and they still have the checkerboard square, and they still have all the Freemasonic stuff there, which would explain a lot because Jimmy Kimmel has gotten away with quite a bit, and he's one of the Hollywood gatekeepers. Ellen was another one of them, right? And Jimmy Kimmel is just not funny. He's kind of mean. And, like he had those bits where he would encourage parents to lie to their kids about eating their Halloween candy and traumatize the kids and a whole bunch of other shit like that, right? Mean-spirited, ritualistic things. And he was on this thing called The Man Show where he was really misogynistic and, horrific to women. And there's this video that I used to have somewhere on my channel in multiple Jimmy Kimmel videos where he's behind this girl and pretending to grab her ass and like grope her as she's looking through one of those, you put a quarter in and you get like a binocular kind of thing, sort of to view, something more closely. And him and the other clown that was on that Man Show were laughing. And then Jimmy Kimmel became an ardent feminist and liberal. And he was talking about, he hosted the Emmys when Me Too was going on. And he was talking about, severing the penis. There was a good thing the Oscars, that the Oscar doesn't have a penis, like the stuff like that, right? Anti-man shit. Completely reversed himself, but still the same asshole. And then these videos surfaced of him being in blackface with Oprah Winfrey and then Karl Malone in a very derogatory way. And he just went on vacation for 3 months, which was, he handled it better than all these other people. Ellen got canceled and all these other people got canceled. And Jimmy Kimmel just went on vacation, and 3 months later, everyone forgot about it. But he should have been canceled by the liberals, right? And then he's just been such a piece of shit. He went after Aaron Rodgers. He went after Aaron Rodgers about Epstein having a list. And now he's like, let's get that list out, right? So he said that, he made fun of the list and the Epstein stuff and all that shit until it was turned on Trump. And, he had Stormy Daniels on to, he had these mushrooms that were representative of Trump's penis, right? And so weird shit that he did. Like she had to pick the mushroom that most resembled Trump's manhood. So like, real fucked up guy, right? And I covered him, and I don't like him. And I don't like comedians that suck and don't speak truth to power, all the things that they did, back, when they were kissing Joe Biden's ass. I mean, he had Hunter Biden on, and Hunter Biden had a book about his crack addiction, and Jimmy Kimmel's got on his knees and serviced the guy, right? It was so fucking gross. Like how much he kissed Hunter Biden's ass, right? That was before the laptop was, the laptop stuff was validated. And he just, the way that these guys praised Joe Biden when he was so, like, none of these comedians want to make fun of Joe Biden, who was clearly having dementia, was having a full-blown dementia. And so Jimmy Kimmel's should have been canceled. He sucks. He shouldn't be on TV. I dislike him. But this thing with Trump is 100% wrong. Because Jimmy Kimmel barely said anything. And, censorship sucks for everybody. This isn't about Jimmy Kimmel. This is about all of us. And Trump is, like, he's going full dictator, full martial law shit. Like, he's literally doing the things that the Democrats warned everybody they would do. They didn't even think he was going to do it. And now he is. And he's being ordered to do it. He isn't doing this on his own. Trump isn't doing it because he's, like, fucking the president and he's, he can just go do it. He's being encouraged and allowed to do it by the people who control him. Israel being amongst them, right?
What is going on?
That's right. This is fast developing this afternoon, Jake, amid pressure from the Trump-aligned FCC. And in the past few minutes, ABC confirmed to CNN that Kimmel's show will be off the air, quote, indefinitely. We have not yet heard from Kimmel or his representatives. That's how quickly this has been developing. But let's back up and look at what Kimmel actually said on the program that has caused controversy. This is from Monday night in his Monday evening monologue. Kimmel suggested that the alleged killer of Charlie Kirk might have been a pro-Trump Republican. He said, quote, the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. He said in between the finger pointing, there was grieving. Kimmel was expressing... That's
not a cancelable thing. That's not even like something where, there's nothing there. There's nothing in what he said there compared to what all the people are saying. Now, there are a couple things here. One, why not show the clip? They're not showing him actually doing this, right? Because, like, they're scared of Trump's wrath. Right? Like, they're not, they quoted him, but they didn't show you the clip. And it's the same thing on, let me go to MSNBC here.
We have breaking news. ABC has just announced here that they will be preempting the very well-known show Jimmy Kimmel Live indefinitely. That's confirmed by ABC, and it comes at a very tense time with many of the issues we've been covering tonight. There was a backlash on the right because Jimmy Kimmel, after the Charlie Kirk shooting, made the statement that he viewed, quote, new lows with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and with everything they can to score political points from it, end quote. I've just
Okay, so Brian Stelza left off the new lows, right? New lows for MAGA people, which was, again, offensive to MAGA people, but they've been saying shit like this forever. So the first thing is we know that when CBS got rid of Stephen Colbert, it was partially due to the fact that he's losing a shit ton of money. Like he's making half the money he used to, and the network is actually losing money on that show because people don't watch that shit anymore. And so Jimmy Kimmel's and Jimmy Fallon are also losing money. And so this is a way for ABC Disney. Remember, they're owned by Disney and ESPN, all these groups. It's a way for them to distance themselves from Kimmel, and maybe they get something from Trump. Like CBS was getting a merger deal. Like Trump is totally willing to make deals with these companies. And so they get rid of this guy who doesn't do any damage to Trump because the people who watch Jimmy Kimmel's, they're just not important to the grander scheme of things. But Trump actually looks at this stuff and he's really butthurt about all this stuff. And so he can give whatever Disney, ABC something, they'll probably get something out of this deal. But it's not really a fireable offense, or it isn't a censoring offense. And, Trump, so then Trump comes in and says this.
President Trump, who is staying behind me for the final night of his state visit with the royal family here at Windsor Castle, is celebrating after ABC announced that it is taking Jimmy Kimmel's late night show off the air indefinitely following criticism over comments that he made in the days after Charlie Kirk's murder. The president declared victory basically tonight, writing on Truth Social that this is, quote, great news for America. The ratings challenge Jimmy Kimmel's show is canceled. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent and worse ratings than even Colbert, if that's possible. That leaves Jimmy and Seth, two total losers on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC. Now, before we go any further about the major questions that have been raised by this decision tonight.
Okay, so you got a bunch of celebrities and people whining about this, but it's a done deal. The number one reason is no one cares about these late night shows anymore. Saturday Night Live is atrocious, and because they've all gone so far left, and they're not funny. Like they're political in a bad way, and they suck. Like there's just not good sketches. There's no good comedy. I've been mocking these motherfuckers for years, right? The only thing I can say about Jimmy Kimmel's is everything I would copy, everything that I would mock about Stephen Colbert, I had to do it in short bits because CBS sucks at copywriting. But NBC is smart, and they realize by getting these clips out, at least that they're promoting that show. But other than that, he's so bad, just as Stephen Colbert is. And comedians who don't do their job and are completely compromised by the powers that be, and now Trump has seized all kinds of power. It's hilarious, right? Like nobody saw this coming. Of course, Trump was going to be vengeful, and these companies are now all caving, which they're all talking about, but they're caving because they're being told to cave. And Trump is getting away with all this shit because he's doing what the controllers, what the so-called elite want him to do. And so, with that, there's this one more thing I want to get to here. This is a huge part. And J.D. Vance and this clown Waters in this interview, it's just, the whole thing is brutal. Okay, so this video is going to be 3 hours long. And I'm going to also put this voiceover on my Journey series. It's a short one. So it's 4 o'clock now. I've worked outside for a couple hours, and this video was a long one to put together. And this video is so long, I don't want to add anything to it. But I just watched some things, a couple of reports on CNN and MSNBC about Jimmy Kimmel's. And then I went to Fox News, and Will Cain, who I saw already interview the comedian Dave Smith, who was one of the guys that Israel pressured not to be on the show with Charlie Kirk, pressured Charlie Kirk to not put on his show because he was Jewish, but he was pushing back on some of the things that Israel was doing. And the two reports on CNN and MSNBC, hopefully they'll put them up on YouTube. If not, I'm recording them right now. And they had some interesting things. And another joke that Jimmy Kimmel made at Trump's expense about him being, not grieving properly. And then Trump saying that Jimmy Kimmel lost his show because he has a lack of talent and got poor ratings, but not because of the FCC. And the FCC obviously putting pressure on it, these guys, all these companies, and a deal that ABC was involved in. So they had all that kind of shit, which I'll get into tomorrow. And then I saw Will came with this guy, Dave Smith, who's a real piece of shit. And he was defending them banning Jimmy Kimmel. And then Rob Schneider, who I like, who's been an anti-vax comedian. Rob Schneider, from Saturday Night Live. He's a right-wing comedian who, usually is practical in what he said. But he, and I missed the first part of what he said. But I don't think he, based on what he said in the second part, they showed a clip of Johnny Carson defending, and I'll see if I can find that clip again too tomorrow. I didn't record it because I missed some of it on the TV. But if they post it tomorrow, then I'll see if I'll show you the clip. But Rob Schneider was basically saying it was okay to censor Jimmy Kimmel. So I just wanted to say this about all that and everything that I showed you this thus far. The problem with all these pieces of shit out there is they're so bought into their partisan bullshit that they never say the right thing in certain circumstances. I mean, they're right when their side is right. They're on the right side of things when their side is right. But when the other side does the same thing, when their side does the same thing that they're complaining about the other side, because Rob Schneider had talked a lot about censorship. He was being censored when they were canceling everybody. And now he's okay with Jimmy Kimmel being canceled because Jimmy Kimmel got too far down the echo chamber of the Democratic Party. But, the best person on free speech that I heard talk about it was RFK Jr., and I'm sure he's changed his tune now he's a Trump shill. And he said that, some of these, when they went after the ACLU or these groups went after some of the Nazis and some of the real, hate groups, his father and his family was very clear that they couldn't censor these groups. These groups still had the right for freedom of expression. And so the way freedom of expression is supposed to work in America is that you let everybody speak and you give people a platform to speak, but you don't have to listen, right? People don't have to listen, and they're, people should be good enough in terms of their moral integrity not to buy into the bullshit, right? And so there's always been hate groups. Some of them, like Antifa, is just a carbon copy of something called the Anarchists, which was a group run by governmental agencies, that was a controlled group that was supposed to be a radical group, but it was controlled, just like Hamas is and Al-Qaeda was and all these groups. They're actually controlled by America or some other group, right? Like Israel controls Hamas and America controlled Al-Qaeda, to do false flag type things. And, that the majority of people don't want to do hateful things and violent things. They might, sympathize with some of these ideas, but something inside them stops them from murdering people. But what they're saying now is people are so weak and so indoctrinated and so morally decrepit that we can't have free speech because people are too weak, and if they hear something, they'll become radicalized and go do bullshit, right? If somebody in political power calls somebody a Nazi, that these people go out and kill them. Again, blaming everything on the individual, like I said earlier, when we know that militaries and armies and governments and, corporations and these, evil organizations and religions, the power organizations kill a lot more people than individuals killing other individuals. It's always done by groups of individuals with power, that, especially governments that can legally kill people. And, all these people are on the wrong side of this thing because, and, it's never just a blank answer of just, it's totally one side is right. But in terms of censorship, and people will say I censor people when I ban them, but they don't understand that, when you run a comment section, like a long time ago, two people got into an argument in my comment section, and one person published the person's address, and the person who got their address published went to YouTube, and YouTube came to me. And it was negatively affecting me and my channel. And it was something that I had to fucking deal with, right? Because two boneheads were doing something that was unrelated to my video, and they were having some personal dispute that had nothing to do with anything to do with me, but it was happening in my comment section. And so, you know, I monitor the comment section. If you can't behave, and people say things in the comment section that hurts my videos and hurts my ability to get out there, I mean, the algorithms work against me because YouTube puts some of the responsibility on the person who's monitoring the comment section, right? Even though YouTube had the ability to hide comments and ban people, which they weren't doing way back then. And so then they started to do that. But people have wrecked their comment sections in private companies by doing dumb shit and saying dumb shit. And when people say racist shit and people say things that I know, you know, that I don't agree with, you know, that's hateful, but also is a bad reflection on me and the channel. You know, it's like I'm hosting a party and I'm not a good host. And I make the rules perfectly clear. And if you go, fuck you, I'm not going to obey your rules, then get the fuck out of my house, motherfucker, right? You know, so, I mean, that's what I look at it. You know, get the fuck out of here, right? Like, that's what I would do if you were, you know, if I asked people not to do something and you did it anyway, get the fuck out of my house, right? And, you know, you can go to your house and do it, or you can go to somebody else's house and do it, right? But don't do it here. And so when people call that censorship, they don't understand. They don't understand their responsibility. If people set up, again, this is my comment section on my videos, so I'm responsible for it. And I expect people to be respectful to each other and say things that are consistent with what's going on and not spam people. Like, spamming's bad. You don't agree with that? Like, you don't want spammers to be censored, right? You want endless amounts of spam, you know, all these things. But again, this isn't censorship. This is people acting out inappropriately in a private setting, and they can still go do this shit somewhere else on their own channel or other places, right? And the stuff that has to do with me personally, you don't get to dump your shit on me. You know, go dump it on somebody else who wants to be your, like, fucking your punching bag, but I'm not that, right? Like, you know, and I set clear boundaries about that because people suck, right? So that's my view. You know, there lots of people suck, and especially they show their suckiness more on the internet anonymously than other places. But in all that, I believe that people should be able to express themselves wherever it is, on their YouTube channel and their places. You know, you have your own way, you have your own place to express yourself on Facebook and YouTube, and, you know, they deal with the whatever community guidelines, and you can go at 4chan, and there's any number of places on the internet where you can express yourself. And everyone should be able to do it. And if people are so stupid and so degraded that they fall for this low shit like they did with Trump, then let them wreck society, right? That's, you know, that's why I don't push back against this Trump thing in any emotional way. This is where we are, right? A bunch of dumb fucks, you know, who voted for Joe Biden and got worked on Trump, and they did a bunch of things to piss off the American people, so much so that they elected Trump again because he was their only other option, and they ran Kamala Harris, who was basically unelectable. And a bunch of dumb fucks thought Trump was great, even though he displayed who he was. I mean, we knew he was Epstein's buddy way back then, but they denied all that shit. They were in denial, and they still are in denial, many of them. And that's where America is. A bunch of dumb fucks electing, like, people who are just, you know, openly, if you look at the people, you know they're going to fucking wreck the country. When you look at Joe Biden and Trump, if they were the most powerful people in the world, they would have wrecked the country a lot quicker. And the people behind the scenes are allowing this to happen because America is dead-ass broke every possible way, bankrupt, morally, emotionally, financially. And so it has to change. Changes are you know, upon us. And the divine forces are also wanting this demonic system to end. So we can do nothing against it. We can stop none of it. And so all we can do is watch it, find a way to enjoy it, make it, you know, be grateful for it, be, you know, aware of it, that it's the end of something bad and the beginning of something hopefully better. When one thing ends, we have an option to go in the other direction, do something better, right? But all these pieces of shit like Rob Schneider and Dave Smith and all these people who are against censorship, when Biden was doing it to all of us and the people on the right, and Trump was against censorship when he got auto-banned or he got deplatformed, and now they're doing it to the other side. And so this is where we're at, right? You know, the Republican voices and Fox News and these other people should be hammering Trump, and they're not. Like, there's just things that people know are wrong. And, you know, that's gone. Like, that's gone. And people just are all subjective, and they're all partisan, and they're all wrapped up in their little belief system that's shared by a bunch of other dumb fucks. And when they get power, they're going to push for everything that they can do, not being aware that in 2 years their opponents will have that very same power, and they'll use it against them in the same way, and they'll whine like little bitches like the Democrats are doing now. It goes back and forth. This is showing you that we're fucked, and we should be extincted, right? It's like we're walking into a lion's den, or we're walking over a cliff, or we're eating poison shit, and we're just standing in water in the middle of a lightning storm. Like we're just doing things that are like we're self-destructive and suicidal, and we're saying, hey, we don't want to be here anymore. Like we don't belong here anymore. Like it's like some kind of thing in that movie, The Happening, or some of these movies where people just start killing themselves. They get overwhelmed by something. There's like the self-destruct button has happened, and humanity is self-destructing. And it's going to get worse with nuclear war and these things. It's going to happen quickly. And once it happens, people will be like, oh, I think we should have probably not done what we did, right? Some people will have the common sense to realize, yeah, we all brought this upon ourselves. But anyways, I might repeat this voiceover tomorrow in my video because this video is long, and bring it back in when I cover Kimmel's tomorrow. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. But let's get back to the other stuff here. So the title of this is, We're Going After You. Vance issues serious warnings. So across the board, whether it be Trump tamping down on Harvard and these other schools for their protests against Israel. I mean, Israel's a big part of this. And then the criticism now, and then all the things they're doing with martial law and military on the streets, breaking posse comitatus, and then the stuff with the big, beautiful bill. I mean, all these things, what he's doing with immigration, where they're just saying, fuck you, we don't care what you want, and we're just taking your lifestyle. I mean, they're snatching your lifestyle. And I've said over and over again, people they believe that the controllers are just doing this to be dicks. But they're doing it because we're fucking broke, and you can't sustain, your lifestyle's out of stock, right? Like, this is inevitable. So, I mean, that's the only excuse that Trump has. Somebody has to do this because, they have to change everything about American life. And they haven't been able to grab the guns. I mean, there's all these things they haven't been able to do that have blocked them from doing this. But, they can't allow this to go on for much longer. There's going to be, big events happening one way or another, and they're just trying to, move people to give up things that they don't want to give up, right? And this is J.D. Vance shilling for all these groups.
Did Kirk's assassin act alone? How big of a threat is trans terrorism? And why is Barack...
Trans terrorism. Did this motherfucker just say trans terrorism?
Barack Obama pointing fingers. Here's part 2 of my exclusive with Vice President J.D. Vance. The FBI is now looking into as many as 20 or more other people who may have corresponded with this assassin beforehand. There may have been foreknowledge of the shooting. If there are co-conspirators here, what kind of threat level are we talking about?
Well, we don't know, Jesse, and that's why I've been so proud of Cash and the way that he's handled this investigation.
Yeah, Cash is just fucking brilliant. So, just so you guys know, when the more people you get involved, the more moving parts you have for one of these operations, the more like crisis actors, the more, whatever it is, the more complex it gets. And, what they like to do is take one lone guy and either kill him like they did with Trump's fake assassination attempt, or stick him in jail and throw away the fucking key, never to be heard of again. But if you bring in all these other people, eventually some of these people will be charged with a lesser crime. They might not be, they might be able to speak for themselves, and so who knows what happens with them. And the more relatives you have, the more all these people, loose ends. So very seldom they find more than one person involved, right? And all these people chatting with this kid online are other kids who are, probably thought it was just a joke, whatever it was. That's what they'll come out and say. But still, you know, when they're talking about these dragnets for something that's already fucking fake, right? That's already not believable, you know, then they can just grab anybody, you know, like anybody that's you know, on these social media platforms.
Because he's cast as wide a net as humanly possible. And the FBI really is looking at everything. By the way, there's a lot of weird stuff out there. For example, the CEO of Discord, or one of the leaders of Discord, said that there were no Discord chats that involved this guy. Now we know that there were Discord chats that involved this guy. So we need to look at...
So, you know, oftentimes they make shit up. And there's conflicting stories. Like there's the initial story. So there's evidence being leaked, and then the police are finding evidence, and they think it's this one person, and then that person disappears, and the whole story disappears. And all the videos of people talking about that guy disappear. And something like this with the Discord guy, you know, it's probably more likely that the Discord guy was right, that there was nothing on Discord, and that these guys all, you know, swept in and said, hey, yeah, there is, motherfucker, and, you know, threatened him in some way. And then he backed off, and then he's going along with this story. Other than that he missed it or he's intentionally lying. But, you know, they come out like the official story is believable. This is a lying motherfucker right here. I mean, this is just a, you know, effeminate piece of shit, like they all are. And, you know, people who believe him, I mean, certain people on the left don't, but they're still sheeple. But with the majority of people who question the official story, which is more and more people, this is not credible, right?
Everything. We need to leave no stone unturned. My own attitude to this, and people will send me stuff, Jesse, you know, from the deepest, darkest corners of the internet. Some of it sounds pretty crazy, but I'll send it to Cash and I'll talk to my team because I want us to leave no stone unturned. It's the only way to honor Charlie is to get to the...
So he's basically saying, send all your crazy theories to me.
bottom of exactly how this person was radicalized and who else was involved in it.
How was he radicalized? You know, again, they've convicted him and they already have their agenda, right? So this is the agenda.
Now, we could find out that this person was radicalized and it was terrible and there were a lot of very evil people in his life, but they didn't have foreknowledge.
Right.
We may find out that there were many, many people who were involved in helping this guy pull off the shooting. We just have to get to the bottom of it. That's what justice demands. That's what being a good friend to Charlie demands.
The
Jesus Christ.
militant transgender movement, is that a domestic terrorist threat?
If you are encouraging people to commit acts of violence against the United States government or against your fellow Americans, absolutely, you're involved in a terrorist movement. I don't know enough about that particular organization.
That doesn't even exist, right? So there's a militant transgender movement. Look, the transgenders are fucked. They're going to be targeted. They're already targeted. They're not really well liked, even in the gay community. And the whole thing that was pushed on America, there's a lot of people who are pissed about it and didn't want to speak up about it. And now this thing with Charlie Kirk, like that movement is fucked. But come on, like this isn't some military. They're not like some terrorist group.
But what you increasingly see, Jesse, is you see people in the trans community and other members of the far left who are saying they are so threatened by negative rhetoric that they must take arms and attack people. If your movement is telling you to commit acts of violence against people for...
It's just so fucking stupid, right? We know who the motive, like, you know, I've gone through the motives here. The people who are on the attack and who are benefiting, Israel is now invading Gaza City whilst Trump is going on the attack in more new ways. And, you know, he's not hiding from the Epstein thing anymore. We know who benefited from this, right?
Speaking words that you don't like. Number one, you're evil. And number two, you are engaged in a terrorist movement.
Number one, you're evil.
And that's part of what we have to root out in the White House. And this is very important.
Like, this is all bad shit. And it sounds like, you know, if you're a Republican, yeah, he's going after all these groups that we hate. But once they start doing that, remember, this is in wake of what Trump did to what the Democrats did to Trump. And now you have the same thing being done by Trump to the Democrats, who are going to be in power in 2 years. And in 4 years, there'll be a Republican president, probably with the House and the Senate. And then they're just going to go back to the same old bullshit they were doing under Biden. but even worse. They'll go back and forth, the right taking some of your rights, the left taking some of your rights, and just building on it till everybody's living in a fucking shoebox and nobody owns anything anymore and is supposedly loving it, right? As was predicted by the World Economic Forum.
I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've talked to, Stephen Miller.
You'll own nothing and love it.
Probably 7 times in the past 2 days. We are working very hard to ensure that the funding networks for left-wing violence, that the radicalization networks for left-wing violence, that if you encourage or fund your fellow Americans or anybody else to commit acts of violence because you disagree with political speech, you are going to be treated like a terrorist organization, and we're going to go after you.
Because Joe Biden said whites.
They're doing all these things, right? That, again, it makes sense to the right-wing people and all the grieving Charlie Kirk fans, but this was done intentionally to do this, right? Problem, reaction, solution.
Supremacy was the biggest domestic terror threat.
Which, of course, is absurd. The statistics don't bear that out. But if you look at what the Biden administration did against the phantom threat of white supremacy, we actually need to take some of the lessons and say, if there is funding sources that is going for this stuff, if you're an NGO and you're actually funding riots and other kinds of political violence, why wouldn't we go after that? Why wouldn't we cut off those funding sources? And why wouldn't we prosecute people who engage in violence? It's interesting, Jesse. The people who are saying this is Gestapo stuff, they're calling us Nazis for saying that if you're funding or supporting left-wing violence, you ought to pay consequences for it. It really makes...
They're saying that because you're lying pieces of shit that are going against people's constitutional rights, and that you're doing something on the behalf of these controlling people, and then handing all this power over to the Democrats so they can run amok. Like, this is going back and forth, and they'll be still control everything you say, monitor everything you say. So you'll not be allowed to criticize the government. I mean, they're making this place into China. Like, they're giving you a deal. Go look at what life is like for Chinese people, and that's what they're doing here. And that's not exaggeration. That was part of a plan. And they know how to do it, and they have to, really what they want to do is get rid of everybody over 40 because, all of us aren't going to accept that shit. And we really can't. Like, we're too old to, to reinvent ourselves, right? And so, and we didn't grow up with it. But all these depressed kids that have grown up on the internet who spend more time on the internet than they do in the real world, they only need these little shoebox places. They're completely wired different. Their brains are all fucked up from the time on internet and video games and pornography and all that shit. And, the people who are 30 and under. And if they could just move those guys to whatever small little villages and they'll be happy with their life because they don't care. They don't even go out to the real world that much. And so, this is the, there's going to be a massive culling of older people because that's what they have to do. And they have to take all your land, and they have to take all these things that people, home ownership and cars, and they'll push all this agenda. And then what Trump doesn't do, the Democratic president will do, right?
So you think that the left has not done any of the soul searching it has to do to actually deal with political violence in this country?
Jasmine Crockett says, yeah, she calls people Hitler, but it doesn't mean she's responsible for any violence that happens.
Well, I'd ask Jasmine Crockett, what is it that you want people to do when you call them Nazis? What is it?
Well, what do you want them to do?
That you want them to do when you call them fascists? What is the proper...
What is the proper way? What's it do? How do you do? What are you doing, Jasmine? Jasmine, what do you think we need to do?
Response when you say that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Charlie Kirk are threatening your safety, what do you expect people to do? This rhetoric is...
Yeah, those people are, not for the most part, especially liberals, going to go sniper somebody. I mean, who does that? Like governments and like Israel and Mossad and CIA.
Completely out of control, and it's part of this entire network of violence that exists on the far left. You dehumanize your political opponents. You fund paid activists to go and harass them and terrorize them. We've had a White House senior staffer just in the past week who has had actual representatives of the Democratic Party going around passing leaflets trying to get his neighbors to harass him and showing people where he lives, where his wife lives, where his young family lives. If that's not political violence, if that's not political harassment, I don't know what the term means.
I don't know what the term means anymore.
Obama says your White House is dividing the country and you're exploiting Kirk's death to attack Democrats.
We're not exploiting Charlie Kirk's death to do anything except for achieve justice. And I think if Barack Obama...
No, but we are exploiting his death.
I haven't seen that comment, Jesse, but if he said that, that's absolutely disgusting.
This is disgusting. He would say things just like Netanyahu said disgusting, right? All right, like I just, it gets worse. I listen. I mean, it's just all this stuff. But you see where they're going with this. They're on the attack. They were on their heels with Epstein less than a week ago. Charlie Kirk died, and now they're rolling all this shit out. They were rolling these things out on a daily basis. Jimmy Kimmel's the first domino to fall, and there'll be more to come. So here, this is the last thing, and I want to wrap this up. I'm sure there's more shit that's already happened and will happen, but this video is already really long. I've got to edit the rest of it and get it up here. But, they're rolling it out. It's happening really quickly. Like, this was supposed to be just a video about Israel and the stuff, the acting stuff, right? But this is all, it's a show for you, and the show is taking away your rights right now. The show is changing the definition of what an American lifestyle is going to be like.
Given with all that's going on with Charlie Kirk's assassination and the left wing, a lot of left wing violence going on, do you have plans? And actually, this is a great opportunity with all these people here. Do you plan on designating Antifa finally a domestic terror organization? So
she's got reporters now that just lob him these questions and support. Like he's changed around, which I suggested he do the last time he was president. Because he was always, he had even Fox was against him a lot and was, they didn't like him over at Fox. Rupert Murdoch would never really like this guy. And so now he has all these shills, which is, would have been better the first term when he wasn't this fucking bad. But now that he's this bad, he's just, he's got all these people that he's threatening the lamestream media. And he's brought in all these shills who are, fake truthers, right-wing pieces of shit.
Well, it's something I would do, yeah. If I have support from the people back here, I think we'd start with Pam, I think. But I would, if you give me, I would do that 100%. And others also, by the way. But
he's called all kinds of people, like gangs, terrorist organizations. So then he can apply terrorist laws that were put in by the Bush administration and exploited by Obama when he was droning kids. They're just, they've been doing this systemically now on both sides. They've been fucking you over for years, and now it's like really, it's gone into like turbo drive. All right, I'm going to end this one here. I'm losing my voice, and it's just, a long video. But you see what's going on here. Only spirituality will save this world. Its power mile definitely points to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.